Hi. All right. This is what is this, podcast 3 for the new Social Dialects American. Uh, I'm Harris. The Ginger Jew is Ethan, and Lord Tachungus is Dotson. And today we are just going to see where the day takes us.
All right, so where is the day taking us? All right.
Well, like I said, the only thing I can really think of to talk about is the whole New York City vaccine passport thing and whether or not that could potentially spread elsewhere. I mean, I don't think it might. Well, it might, but not statewide, if that makes sense.
Well, I kind of have it from the perspective of France did the same thing. They did it for all of France, not just Paris. And yeah, there were people protesting in the streets, but they also went from like 60% vaccinated to like 85% vaccinated, like within weeks after making that announcement. So if it proves to be an effective method of getting the vaccination up to whatever number they want, then I can easily see it being implemented elsewhere.
That's fair, but that's also forcing people to take an experimental drug.
I mean, they've done it before, Tuskegee experiments.
I mean, that's true. Except then they usually lied. So
Right, which is one of the many reasons that we're all, up in arms about it, or paranoid about it, if you will.
Oh. The way I see the vaccine passports possibly spreading, I feel like there's two sides of this we have to address. Would they be able to do it legally? And by legally, I mean, would there be courts and police actually stopping them from implementing it? And two, would the politicians who implement it politically survive implementing them? Because I don't think Bill de Blasio or his type of people are suddenly going to get voted out of New York. You're not going to suddenly get a Republican because de Blasio said, hey, you have to get the shot to go to a bar again.
Right, I mean...
I know, that's the big crux of the issue right there. If he does pass it, would he get reelected? And when New York City is literally just a goddamn liberal cesspool, I think it's like 10-1 Democrat to Republican. If he runs again, he would win without a question. So
out here in Oklahoma, our state passed laws that said the schools cannot mandate vaccine verification. They cannot mandate mask mandates. And by the way, this does extend to the college campuses that are federally funded. So at my school, I will not have to wear a mask. I will not have to prove that I'm vaccinated. However, if you go to the town meetings, or if you hear recordings of the town meetings, almost unanimously amongst the leadership, even out here, I'm in a relatively blue dot in a red sea, but even out here, it is almost unanimous that within the school board that they want these things. They apologize in emails nonstop to us saying, we're sorry that we can't mandate a mask thing. It's against the law. Now, I understand, obviously, laws do not are not dictated necessarily by, laws do not necessarily reflect morality. But like at some point, you got to recognize that the institutions are actively trying to fight back against the sovereignty of the state, if you will. So I can see it
because
happening
they're trying
anyway.
to act like they're above it. Like, all right, you know how they're always just like follow the science, all that other fun stuff. When they're really not following the science, like we can look at the statistical data, and it's not even just for the U.S. You could look at it across the globe, and you'll notice that when masks were mandated, it didn't really help anything, which means the masks are a non-factor in everything. So it's kind of ridiculous that, in your case, the colleges, but even here in New York, where everyone's just like, well, we gotta wear masks again. Like, all right, guy, that didn't work the first time. What makes you think it's gonna work the second time?
Well, they had an investigation over with Governor Cuomo for both the nursing home stuff and the sexual assault or sexual misconduct or whatever stuff. And despite both of those investigations basically turning up incredibly negative for him, he's not going to resign. I fully expect him to get reelected. So
I don't think he's going to get.
Anticipate.
I think the Democrat Party internally is going to take him down, but he's going to serve out the rest of his term unless actual federal charges hit him. Because the AG said that he didn't just act unethically; he broke state and federal law. So it'll get submitted to the FBI. They'll probably just have him quietly finish his term. And I would like to congratulate New York Attorney General Letitia James on becoming the unofficial Democrat nominee for governor, because she's going to be the one to try and replace him.
Oh no, she's 100% trying to run, but I also don't think Cuomo's going to go down like that. I mean, all right, look at the whole nursing home thing, right? We all know what he did. It's a fact that he killed people. Why did the Biden, why did they drop it? Like, the whole case, they were just like, no. So, what makes you think, with the whole sexual misconduct thing, that the federal government's going to go after him? I mean, they could go after him on the state level, but the state didn't go after him for killing a bunch of New Yorkers.
Because Me Too is more powerful than old people.
Which way do old people generally vote, Harris? What's the demographics on that? Do you happen to know?
And here in New York, they almost usually
everywhere. It's universally true.
I mean, it's a federal level.
Wait, who? What?
I mean by federal, because it was a federal investigation that was dropped.
Which way do old people usually vote? They usually vote Republican.
There you go.
At least I think so. Yeah. Except here in New York, they usually vote blue.
Well.
Also,
but even then,
who overwhelmingly doesn't pay taxes?
Well,
people who are retired.
That's the big thing right there.
And which side of the political aisle openly advocates for the protection of innocent life? And which side actually advocates for the convenience of life?
Yeah, that's fair.
A party that believes that they can kill you before you're born to serve the selfish interests of a mother is also going to be totally okay with killing you at the end of your life to serve the selfish interests of the state. It's just a natural progression.
But we even
pointed out the hypocrisy of that the last time too, right? Because
it's probably going to be a recurring theme.
And we're
just going to turn to every other right-wing show and podcast ever if all we ever do is point out the hypocrisy of the left.
Well, it's hard to point out like the hypocrisy of the right, because even when they are being hypocritical, it isn't to the extreme that you see on the left.
I think it's easier to point out the hypocrisy on the right. It's just their hypocrisy is out of greed, not wartime strategy. The Republican hypocrisy is always centered around what's best for my wallet.
Then why is
they talk about conservative values all the time, but the only things they go to bat for are corporate tax corporate tax decreases. That's the only thing they seem to really fight over. But decreasing the size of government, no, we need to fund the government. We can't shut down. National Right to Life even said they don't want to repeal Roe v. Wade. Like, your name is National Right to Life. You're supposed to be for pro-life bills, but you don't want to defeat the one thing stopping you from passing those bills? How are you a pro-life organization?
Well, they've surrendered the high ground. They've broken rule number 4.
Yep. They surrendered the high ground because they're doing it to make money. It's the old mission creep. Like, they originally wanted to get pro-life bills in, but then they realized, man, if we never actually get these bills in, but we keep fighting for them, we can stay around forever and keep riding this gravy train.
Oh, that's every bureaucracy ever.
Yeah. And to answer why they'll still vote Democrat, why they might even keep Cuomo in, although I don't think Cuomo is going to run for re-elect. 2 words: total demoralization. Yuri Bezmenov, right again.
I also think it has a lot to do with ignorance. We've all commented that since Biden got into office, a good portion of the people that we saw spewing nonsense and Trump hate, blah blah blah, nonstop, they have shut the fuck up. They don't say anything anymore in praise of Trump. Now he does still have his propaganda voices out there, but they're few and far between compared to the anti-Trump movement. So they got their guy in power. They don't give a shit what's happening anymore, and they're just assuming that everything is going hunky dory.
Well, I don't even think it's that they don't give a shit. I think they're just, well, I mean, some of them are probably like that. Like, they just don't care. Mean guys off Twitter. You know what I mean? Like, Orange Man's out of office, I win kind of thing. But I think there are some people who fully know that Biden's just not doing anything. Between what he's promised, he's made things worse. Like, I think they know that, and they're just embarrassed to, like.
Sure, yeah. But they're still gonna vote for. They're still gonna vote for him in 2 years.
100%. They're gonna sit there and be like, well, and it's like, no, I don't know, because you're an idiot.
Biden's not going to run in 2 years. I'll be surprised if he's alive in 2 years.
Yeah.
I mean,
he's going to have a blood vessel bust in his brain. His last word's going to be, I wipe my ass, and he's going to die.
Well, how many articles have we seen since Biden's been in office about how they might invoke, or not how they might invoke, how they should invoke, what is it, the 25th?
But who are they coming from? I'm assuming those are coming from right-wing pundits.
No,
I'm seeing them from left-wing people, too.
Yeah, it's from left-wing. And one of, like, the top of medical officials in the White House has even said that...
that one was a former Trump staffer. It was his chief medical officer, I believe.
The same guy that gave Trump flying colors in his health exam?
A clean bill of health, yeah. Because Biden did the standard...
the one under Obama.
Meet the new boss and cleaned house. Well, I think the one under Trump was the one under Obama as well. He just kept the guy on because he was a functionary who did his job.
I would like to, at some point, not necessarily today, but go back to the first year of Trump's presidency and ask, why the fuck didn't he clean house? He was plagued with moles from the start, left over from the Obama administration. Why in the world? He wanted to clean the swamp, drain the swamp. Why in the world did he leave all of those layovers?
There's two main theories regarding that. One, he didn't know any better. He was an outsider because he was new to politics as a primary focus. Politics is always involved in major business, but it's one thing to be buying people under the table as a major real estate developer. It's another thing entirely to be the guy running the ship. But one of the old standby rules of politics is personnel is policy. And if you hire bad personnel, your policy will be bad.
Right.
His policy was overwhelmingly could have been better because he always picked bad personnel for the longest time. So either he was dumb and couldn't drain the swamp because he couldn't recognize it, or he was controlled opposition.
Yeah. I don't know.
I mean, it's a good question. I
don't think Trump's persona would let him be controlled opposition unless he's like really, really, really good at acting. And that would be like he would deserve a lifetime Emmy Award for that, or Golden Globe, or whatever it's called. I don't know.
Isn't the whole point of the Manchurian Candidate that the Manchurian Candidate doesn't know that they are controlled opposition?
Well, isn't the Manchurian Candidate supposed to do a specific deliberate act that they're kind of brainwashed into? Not just that he's slowly turned towards the other side.
It is supposed to be a single act, but I mean, you could expand on it to the point where they're doing multiple acts and they don't even know it.
There is some evidence that it's the whole he was controlled opposition, though, because look at the people his organization endorses. They're all rhinos or Republicrats. It's just that they didn't vote to impeach him. He's an egomaniac. And we like the smart people on the right recognized that from the start and then just tried to use that to our advantage. Like, okay, how can we play up to him to get him to advocate for our stuff? The dumb people denied it and became cultists. Hard to do things. Of course, it really made things hard to do. And what would have kept Trump in office, certainly, was Twitter not banning him sooner. If they just banned him in 2016, he'd still be president.
I don't understand how they were allowed to ban him. Like there was laws passed that say if you are running for office or if you are in office, you must be allowed an account, a verified account. Like that is.
Well, a law is nothing more than ink on paper or bits on screen until a man with a gun enforces it. Do
Well,
you
no,
think the Biden
for
FBI is going to go to Twitter and tell them, please put my number one political opponent back on the internet?
Didn't he
well,
get
no, no, no,
banned?
no, no.
Didn't he get banned
Well,
before the election?
Yeah, he got banned before the election. He was still a seated
Did you
president
really
when
think
he
it was
was banned.
Trump's FBI at any point, though? Have
No,
they ever acted
absolutely
like
not.
Trump's FBI? Exactly. It was the establishment FBI, which Biden is just a piece of the establishment.
Well, that's where the whole their federal protections questions start coming in, because that law is under that protection.
230.
Yeah, where
Well, no.
if you violate that,
The
you kind of
case was like there was a lawsuit that went against. I think it was like actually AOC, where a constituent
she
sued
was
her. Yeah, and it wasn't part of 230. It was just standard protections on free speech and being able to petition your representatives for redress of grievances.
yeah
I think that's
she
what the decision was.
Blocking people, right?
she was blocking Twitter users who were her constituents, and yeah, that's a no go.
And technically, all 330 million Americans are or were Trump's constituents and are now Biden's. But Twitter's going to do what it's going to do because the FBI is not going to stop them. It's ultimately
But
that
even
simple.
look
It's
at
not a country of
the
laws;
new.
it's a country of
Well,
political will.
Is
look at
Twitter
the
going to
new-
do what Twitter's going to do, or is Twitter going to do what the FBI tells Twitter to do?
Yeah.
Well, look at the new White House rules, right? If you post false information or whatever in the fuck, right? If you tweet it or put it on Facebook, you could get your account permanently banned. But how many times does, Biden and his administration post things on Facebook and Twitter that are 100% inaccurate?
Well, it's the
or
White
say
House
things.
the one that's tagging it as false because they're
Yeah,
not
right.
trying to find truth.
So
They're
it's
trying to advance a narrative, and Facebook and
so
Twitter
it-
are overtly helping with that.
so it's like a fucking joke at this point. They
No,
got federal. It's like
just war. It's just war. That's all it is. It's warfare. If you start to analyze all the stuff that happens on these cultural battles as an actual war, it all makes sense. But if you see it as just a political discussion, then you always are going to be perplexed by the hypocrisy of it. It's not hypocrisy; it's strategy.
It's all the art of war, Sun Tzu.
Well,
All warfare is based on deception.
it's not that I'm perplexed by it. I just find it funny how no one else sees it.
Well,
You know what I mean?
I mean, obviously, like there's at least 70 million Americans that see it, and then there's probably 100 million Americans that see it but are silent and begrudgingly go along with it, and then there's 70 million Americans that don't see it at all.
Or refuse to see it because it furthers their goals.
I think it's actually a lot worse than that. I think it's only like 10% of the country, maybe 20%, that actually sees the hypocrisy and understands what's going on. The rest just have tunnel vision. They just believe what they were taught by whoever they trusted in their life. They're the people who vote straight ticket Republican or straight ticket Democrat unless they personally know a guy on the ballot and they go, oh, he's an asshole, I'm not going to vote for him. Or, oh, he's a good dude, but he's a Democrat, I'll vote for him. And they just focus on their job and their kids and their church and their house. That's all they focus on. They don't have time and energy for all these fights. So they trust people they expect to be smarter and more engaged than them, but those people are terrible, terrible people.
Well, placing the trust for your worldview into the hands of a stranger is not a responsible decision.
But it's a convenient one, and we live in an era of convenience at your fingertips. So when we've outsourced everything else for our own comfort, why would we expect safety to be any different? The same people that take their safety into their own hands by carrying a firearm, learning how to treat injuries, learning how to use their firearm properly, learning the laws around it, are also the same people you'll see far more likely to know how to work on their house, know to work on cars, know how to tend to crops, know how to help their communities, because they're agorists or small unit anarchists in the literal sense, not the bomb throwing anarchists. Or they understand that the world of convenience we live in is an aberration. It's going to go away at some point, and it's going to suck when it does.
I watched Idiocracy the other day, and in that movie they spend the first 5 minutes. They spend the first 5 minutes of that movie having an exposition about birth rates, basically, and just yeah. Smart people have less children because they're not that smart after all. So I think that the vaccine passports are a demonstration of hate because I know it's fire opinion, super spicy, but
Actually, I have some for you that might prove that point. Hang on, let me see if I can find it. It actually breaks down like the unvaccinated people in New York City by race, and most of them are Black, Hispanic, and Native American.
yeah, they have a natural distrust for the state because the state has abused them in the past, but for whatever reason, I don't know. I really have no idea why in the world these groups are predominantly blue voters. Somebody must have lied to millions of people over the course of generations for it to make sense.
I know on the most immediate
Well,
level, I've seen the data on it. The reason black people are only vote Democrat is peer pressure.
Well, we spoke about
The name
this
for it's
last
called the
time.
Bradley effect.
They're raised from the time they're born that you can't vote Republican because you're the KKK. Only other people to vote for is the Democrats, and you can't vote third party because you just can't do that.
Did either of your parents tell you at any point in time in any capacity whatsoever what your political leaning should be?
No.
Nope, but my dad regularly read the Limbaugh letter and listened to Rush Limbaugh, and one of my earliest memories was reading about the Kenneth Starr investigations at the age of 5. So I was going to be a conservative of some kind.
I also never got told explicitly. I know that one of my parents is a registered Democrat, one of my parents is a registered Republican. It's not necessarily the ones that you would expect, in my opinion. And I know that we listen to talk radio in the car on the way to stuff. I don't know if if my upbringing necessarily influenced my political leaning, because I mean, you look at my family. My older brother is kind of like me, maybe a little bit more of a bootlicker in my opinion. My older sister, ultra bootlicker, and my younger sister, she's one of those tunnel vision, doesn't give a fuck people. And so how did we end up with this disparity across 4 kids? We were all raised in the same house by the same parents.
Well, that's like me and my brother. Like my brother. Well, no, he's more of like the tunnel vision type, but it's definitely more like with the whole BLM thing, he's just like, yeah, Black Lives Matter, and he's all about it. But I'm like, no, they're kind of, a socialist group. They can, go get fucked. That's tough. As for why.
I looked it up while we were talking about this. Besides the social pressure that they deal with nowadays, the start of it was 2 major causes. 1, Democrat commitment to organized labor, which started making inroads, but then 2, LBJ picking up the mantle of the civil rights movement in the 60s, and JFK doing it as well. And sure, LBJ said he was going to have these inwards voting Democrat for the next 100 years, but that wasn't publicized at the time. That's something we know about now. Just like back then, they didn't know that he showed his giant dick to people, called it Thunderstick, and asked people if they'd ever seen anything that big. But they didn't know about it then, and they didn't care.
You couple that with some other context. For example, the largest pieces, the most fundamental pieces of the Civil Rights Acts, because it wasn't all just crammed into one. It was crammed into like 5 or 6 over the course of a decade or so.
The Republicans,
yeah, it was under Eisenhower when most of these got through, or Gerald Ford.
But the Civil Rights Act, what president did that happen under? And then who gets the credit socially for passing it? It's going to be President LBJ. Just like how people will always blame Bush for TARP, but it wasn't just Bush; it was all Congress.
You know why? It's because LBJ, because Ford and Eisenhower, basically delivered rights that were owed necessarily, right? Appropriately. LBJ delivered something else. LBJ delivered money.
The Great Society, the most expensive failed experiment in American history.
Was it a failure, though? If you think about it from a war strategy.
Yeah, exactly. If it's maintain a population that's beholden to you, runaway success. But as a war on poverty to end poverty, well, it was about as successful as killing poverty as the war on terror was on ending terrorism.
I gotta step away from
they came full circle. They made them slaves again, and they just don't realize it.
The chain is now a ankle monitor.
Yeah.
Or concerns over a pair of handcuffs, or permanent substandard federal housing, because they get something like $80,000 worth of benefits. But in order to qualify, you have to make less than like $50,000 a year. So for you to want to get off benefits and be ahead of the game, you have to make a massive income leap. Otherwise, you're deliberately suffering for less money. And I understand how many people want to make that decision.
Well, that's like, that's the joke of it, right? They basically vote for their own oppression.
It goes back to that Pareto distribution I mentioned earlier, though. If only 20% of them are awake enough to realize, hey, the guys we've been voting in are the guys who've been oppressing us this whole time, and black people overwhelmingly vote due to social pressure, the other 80% are going to browbeat them back into voting Democrat.
Well, it also doesn't help that
you have to make sure you get the right 20%. You have to have the 20% that has control of the black culture. So you would need an Al Sharpton, a Jesse Jackson, Ibram X. Kendi,
even then,
Nas, Jay-Z. You need people like them, movers and shakers in the black community, to tell them.
Look at how that blew up in. Look at how that blew up in what was his name? Ice Cube's phase when he was working with Trump for prison reform. Look how many people turned around and was just like, "Oh, you're an Uncle Tom now." Like, hang on. This guy's been trying for years to get, to help with prison reform, and he contacted Biden. This was during the election, and he contacted Biden's team, and Biden's team wouldn't sit down with him. Trump did, though. So he took the opportunity to sit down with Trump and hash it out. Yet, look at how the black community reacted.
It's I don't necessarily think that has anything to do with whatever minority community they come from. I think that has to do with the ideology that has taken over those communities, which is a puritanical left.
That was to show
they're socially conservative. They vote Democrat because they see voting Democrat as an attribute, a part of their character, not just a function they do, not a policy they support, but part of who they are. And to go against that in a group that explicitly sees itself as a member of an identity group and not an individual status, they see that as a betrayal. It's like your arm hopping off your body and walking away to them.
Well, again, it also doesn't help that they believe in the myth of the great party switch in the 60s.
All of one person who did it, and it was what, Strom Thurmond?
Yeah.
And he actually became less racist after the switch.
Right? Fucking... anyway, but yeah, they believe that. So they still fundamentally believe that, Republicans are the KKK. Meanwhile, how many Democrats... Yeah, right? How many Democrats have gotten endorsed by, either current or former KKK members? Shit, how many Democrats were KKK members? You have that fucking one dude who was...
Robert Byrd, Grand Cyclops of the KKK.
Yeah, are you familiar with Clanbake 1923?
Sorry, I don't listen to hip hop.
It was the DNC rally of 1923, and like 100,000 KKK members marched through fucking Washington D.C. to their Democratic National Convention to vote for whoever candidate. It's called the Clanbake. It's a well-known thing.
I remember Woodrow Wilson screening the first ever movie in the White House, and that movie being the pro-KKK movie Birth of a Nation. But we don't talk about these things in history school because that's much less interesting than telling everybody that the New Deal saved America or something.
Well, I mean, look at who controls the schools.
Exactly. They control the cultural institutions, so they get to set the narrative on all fronts. They don't just control the schools. They control the courts. They control the law enforcement. They control the church. They control the churches, the entertainment industry, anything that builds the culture. They control it.
But I think that something that they do teach in school is that Woodrow Wilson was the first sociologist president in America. But what they don't teach you is why that's a bad thing.
because he was a massive eugenicist, a massive white supremacist, and
They
he thought people were numbers to be manipulated, not individuals to be cared for.
and when they teach it like he was the first sociologist, which means that he was the first president to really have a genuine plan because he understood how society worked. Meanwhile, like for right leaning people, he is considered one of the worst presidents at all. He is a bad man.
He is consistently in the top 5 worst presidents, along with like FDR, Jimmy Carter, Buchanan. And at least I can give Jimmy Carter credit. He was just in over his head and incompetent at the job, but he's otherwise a good person. I mean, he still builds homes with Habitat for Humanity, and he's had, his 87th heart replaced or something recently. Dude's old as fuck.
He's gonna live forever.
Well, especially when he's sitting next to Hyperborean man Joe Biden in those pictures. Oh, my God.
Oh, my God.
So, talking about black voters and starting to try and break the programming of them, Trump gained 6 points of support with black men and 5 with black women, but he still got less than 20% of the black vote. And in the process, he lost 1% of white men's support, and that essentially cost him the election if you exclude the possibility of voter fraud happening, which it did.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
I mean, it's not like we were ever going to get monetized, but now we're demonetized.
Hey, as long as you wait after the first 10 minutes. You have
All right, cool. Yeah, we're starting in. All right, so what percentage of America has been vaccinated with at least 1 dose, according to the stats? Last I heard, it was somewhere around like 65-70%.
Hey, according to fucking Biden, it was 350 million.
Amen, dude.
Yeah, that's the whole fucking country right there.
59% of the population has received at least 1 dose. 51% of the population has been fully vaccinated.
Well, does that count the new 3rd dose that they're going to be needing?
The World Health Organization has suggested a moratorium on 3rd dosing, saying that we need to get vaccine doses to poor countries that can't even get their 1st doses yet. I would just like to point out that saying that we have to distribute it to everybody before anyone else can have more is the same as saying Jeff Bezos can end world hunger with his money. It does not account for corruption, fraud, civil war, theft, all the other shit that stops us from solving problems with just blanket solutions.
And it also, like, I know it's kind of tangential, but like Israel offered the vaccines to Palestine, and they were all like, "Fuck you." And then 3 weeks later, they're crying, "Oh no, they're dosing all the Israelis before they're giving us any." Like, so yeah, that's part of the corruption and all that stuff.
It's part of the war effort. They get to have their cake and eat it. They get to simultaneously say the Jews are trying to poison us, and also the Jews aren't trying to save us. If I unilaterally hated the Jews, I wouldn't act any different.
Yeah. So
now we're definitely demonetized.
No, dude, I operate as a deflector for that topic. So, with 59% is what you've read of the population, and it is growing. Okay.
Well, it's only growing because of the concerns of the passports, and then second lockdown.
So, but once you get vaccinated, you have kind of sort of, not necessarily, but kind of sort of taken your dog out of the fight when it comes to being anti-passport, right? Because now it's like it doesn't really affect you anymore because you've
you already got the shot. Like, it doesn't, even if you're against it, it doesn't really matter.
So I'm looking at the CDC data now. I was looking at a different website. For those over the age of 18, which is what the World Health Organization suggests be vaccinated, 71% have at least 1 dose, 61% are fully vaccinated, but it's just over 50% of the total population, but that includes children and newborns.
Sure. 71 is kind of what I was looking for the sake of my argument, because I want to approach it now with a little bit of Harris's lens, with 71% of fighting age people, and some older, but 71% of, say, mams are vaccinated.
Military age, non-gender specific individuals.
Exactly. If 71% of them are vaccinated, as the non-vaccinated number gets smaller and smaller, they can kind of go 2 ways. One, we can actually embrace the concept of herd immunity and shut the fuck up about it. Or 2, it can become much more aggressive towards getting that smaller and population to be vaccinated. So with that kind of, whether they're getting vaccinated through compulsion via the vaccine passports or genuine desire to, with that number growing, the unvaccinated certainly must be shrinking. Is that indicative of a road to bloodshed, or is there a way to avoid the bloodshed within that demographic scenario?
Honestly, I would think it would be the road too. All right, let me ask you this, right? You got 71% of, the recommended people that are vaccinated. Why is it so imperative that, the remaining 29% get vaccinated? And like you said,
Protect the vulnerable.
but the vulnerable already got it. They were the first ones.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't have a real answer. I'm just trying to give the answers that they're going to give.
Yeah,
I know.
90% of people over 65 years of age have one dose, at least.
Yeah,
80%
but you see
have
what I
fully
mean?
vaccinated.
You have this huge amount of people that have already been vaccinated. And then you have the minority that aren't. So why does it matter that we're not?
Because
it's not about safety.
Does. It's also not even about individuality.
It's not about
do
safety.
what everyone else does.
It's not about safety. It's about obedience. It's about control.
Right? Because you got all these people who are like herd immunity, and I'm like, I don't think you understand what that means, like at all. Like, as long as you can have your vaccine, that's fine, but it doesn't matter if I don't have it.
It's the
right
magical
now,
vaccine, or it's the magical thinking around vaccines that has, well, not always existed, but at least been prevalent for the last 40 some odd years.
well, it's not even the magic. It's the fact that it's being sold to the general public as a vaccine when it's not.
Yeah,
I mean, look at the
it's an
data right
intravenous
now with
therapeutic. That's what I refer to it as. I never call it a vaccine.
Like,
They've even admitted it doesn't prevent transmission. The CDC outright said it. It no longer prevents transmission. It prevents serious illness and death. Like, so your vaccine
But
doesn't
even
vaccinate.
they can't prove that because your severity depends on multiple factors. Hell,
Right.
you could be fucking asymptomatic for all you know. You have no idea unless you get it.
But did you say
what?
that the vaccine, the disclaimer on it says that it prevents serious illness and death?
Dotson
from
said
Dotson?
that the CDC says it.
That has to be a lawsuit, because surely there have been vaccinated people who have died, and it is easily linkable to COVID-19. Surely, even if it was ultra safe, I still would expect that to have happened.
Legislation was passed months ago that granted both the vaccine manufacturers and the government total indemnity from it. Like,
that's ridiculous.
They'd have to be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that not only did the vaccine not vaccinate, but that it was deliberately designed to kill. Which, that's a high bar to clear on that, because it's going to assume innocence on the part of the government.
Any organization that that is in charge of prosecuting itself and can prevent such prosecution
will prevent it.
I mean, that's like, how can anybody take that organization seriously in any capacity whatsoever?
But yeah, like I was saying, like, even look at like the Delta variant, right? Most states with confirmed cases, most of the people who are getting the Delta variant are vaccinated people. Most of the people dying are vaccinated people. Obviously, there is something wrong with the vaccine, and it is leading to people's deaths.
Have you guys met anybody that has gotten COVID and has gotten vaccinated?
Me personally, like on a personal level, no. I know of like a few celebrities, I guess you could say, like Matt Heafy, the lead singer of Trivium, is vaccinated. But like, I read his statement because his friend was unvaccinated and all that other whatever. The way I was looking at it was, it's unprovable. Like, I don't know who your friend is. Like, he never actually showed him. So maybe his friend was overweight. Maybe he just had a compromised immune system or something like that. So him getting as sick as he was could have just been his luck in that situation. Whereas Matt Heafy was like, well, I only had I was only a little sick and it's because of the vaccine, but I don't think it was.
No,
I
you
mean,
misunderstood my question. Somebody who got sick with COVID, got over it, and then later down the road got vaccinated.
I mean, they tried to double up on their protection with both the natural and the artificial.
I don't think I know anybody. I mean, I'm sure I do. I doubt it.
I know
though.
one person, and it's interesting because he like openly mocks the mask stuff. He hates all the mask stuff, but he got COVID, he got over it, and now 6 months later he's getting the vaccinations. I have no explanation for it.
You gotta figure out how that brain works. Cause,
The magical thinking of vaccines. the thinking that we were all taught as kids by the way they marketed vaccines in general was that they will stop you from getting these horrible things. And so if they make a vaccine for it, clearly it's a horrible thing. And when they spent most of a year telling you what a horrible thing COVID is, you're going to think it's horrible enough to justify a vaccine. Then when they tell you they have a vaccine out, you're going to ignore all the contrary stuff because a lot of the people who need to hear it already don't listen to the people who put it out.
Sure.
Or they listen to them, but they know they're crazy. So the one thing they're not crazy on, or that they think they're not crazy on, they're not going to listen to them on that either.
Well, here's my concern when it comes to this example is prior to finding out that this person is getting the vaccine, I would have thought that when push comes to shove, this is going to be a person that will be shoulder to shoulder with me, with us, if you will. But now I don't know. And it's not, because he got the vaccine. I fully expect there are going to be vaccinated people that are going to say, like, hell no, vax passports, get the hell out of here. But at the same time, like, if you have the natural immunity and you recognize that the vaccine is going to have marginal effects. I mean, like, there's reports coming out now from all sorts of places that are suggesting that actually the vaccine, it makes it significantly better to when you do get reinfected. It's like you fight it off way easier compared to natural immunity. I'm not sure about that. I mean, I haven't gotten sick either way.
Because they're not even 100% sure if you can actually get reinfected. I was reading an article on that where they're still not really positive that's a thing that can happen.
I was listening to Dr. Robert Malone last week. He's the guy who invented mRNA technology, and he's obviously been following all the COVID stuff really closely. And he said natural immunity is a far more robust and durable immunity, and that also comes from a study from Emory University. They're not some little podunk JUCO. They kind of know what they're talking about. And they said that it provides all three legs. Yeah, it creates the T cell immunity where you have the wandering antibodies that regularly look for new infections. You have your body's capacity to create new antibodies when a similar virus comes in, and then you have that innate immunity built into your genetic code at that point. Whereas the mRNA vaccines only seem to provide one or two of those legs, and it doesn't last nearly as long. The infection, immortality, immunity lasts at a minimum over a year. It seems to still be robust out to 15 months, 18 months. The vaccine seems like it has a max effectiveness, at least the Pfizer one, of 6 months. You're going to need boosters.
Right. So how do we count this person that I'm referring to when it comes to the question of bloodshed? Like, is this person who's completely cucked for it, or is this person, I don't know, because they're still like anti-mask and stuff. So
you would have to ask his perception on vaccines generally. Is he the kind of person who wants to actually read the insert that comes with the vaccines his kids get? Are his kids fully vaccinated otherwise? When I say magical thinking around vaccines, like, I have argued with people on both sides of the vaccine debate long before COVID was a thing, because on the one hand, the anti-vaxxers are all you're putting aluminum and mercury in my blood, which isn't true anymore. The mercury they had in there was like an extremely small amount, and it wasn't the kind that made people crazy from finishing hats with it. It's a kind that you find naturally in fish, and it gets processed out of your system in extremely small amounts. Whereas the pro-vaccine side was like, my kids are vaccinated, but if you don't get vaccinated, my kids are going to get sick. That's the magical thinking. If the purpose of vaccines is to create herd immunity so that vulnerable people don't get sick, you can't argue that you not getting a vaccine makes the vaccinated at risk. It's those who can't get vaccinated. But
Well, I mean,
the
all right.
average pro-vaccine person doesn't articulate that argument when they argue it. They instead have the magical thinking. The vaccine works well enough that everyone should get it, but it doesn't work so good that I won't get sick, even though I got vaccinated from you giving me that sickness. He could just be one of those people, and that's a very common idea or common ideology in America because it's just what we were taught to believe on some level, or maybe not even taught. It's just an implicit thing that eventually soaked its way into our brains just from the way we've been exposed to vaccines. We've thought of them as the universal solution to illness. That's not just a common cold. If they covered the common cold the way they covered COVID, whew, maybe we'd be seeking a common cold vaccine nowadays.
Or the flu. I mean,
Well, we do have flu vaccines. It's just that there's so many different strains of the flu that come around
Right.
because it's been mutating since the Spanish flu that we experienced, because they're all variants of the Spanish flu. They have to guess which one's going to be popular and which one's going to hit hardest, and so they mass distribute that one. So that's why you have wildly variable effective rates.
Sure. I understand all that, but ultimately, what's the difference between the flu vaccine and all this propositions about the COVID vaccine?
Not just one, it's going to be a
they're not gonna
seasonal virus, so
develop-
that's the similarity. It's a seasonal virus, just like flu is. So, two, it's going to be treated like the flu in that it's going to be a booster shot you get regularly until it's just something they talk about once a year on the news. Hey, guys, COVID season's coming up again along with flu season. Get your booster
Not
shot.
even that. Well, not even that, though. When you get the flu shot, what is the odds that you get heart inflammation?
Well,
Or what are the odds that you die?
I think that you guys misunderstood my question. My question is, do you have to get the flu vaccine every year?
No.
But they are
choose
trying
to.
to make you get the COVID vaccine every year. So ultimately, the COVID vaccine is going to suffer from the same exact problem as the flu vaccine. It's going to have so many different strains, and there's really not going to be one cure-all. What is the purpose of making the COVID vaccine mandatory for people to participate in everyday life, but not doing the same thing for the flu vaccine?
And the
Well,
one thing
that's
we
like
got to from Zoolander, COVID's so hot right now.
Well,
It's
that's
what
like
it is.
the
It's
real
front and
irony.
center in the social conscious. Everyone's scared of it right now. So now that they have, quote unquote, a solution, they want everyone to get it. And it's such a good idea they have to mandate it.
Well,
But
it's not even
I
that.
think over time, if we don't somehow depoliticize this and come to a rational ground, which will never happen, it'll eventually just be normalized because we can't take the panic. Like each individual cannot panic year after year for the same thing.
That shit doesn't even matter, though. Look at how many articles come out saying that if the more people that get vaccinated, the more rapid COVID-19 will mutate to where there will be multiple strains, or you'll eventually get a strain that is vaccine immune, which is arguably the worst kind of disease that you
Robert
can
Malone
get.
has talked about that along with other kinds. He worries about what he calls escape mutants.
Right. I mean, you see it with the polio vaccine.
Yeah. So it doesn't matter what happens because those articles, they're published by left leaning, right leaning. It doesn't matter. They're everywhere. People just don't care. They just don't give a shit. And I think that's why I think it might lead ultimately to bloodshed, is that too many people don't care.
I don't think it'll lead to bloodshed. I think all the places that are going to do the vaccine mandates are the same kind of places that were going to mandate everything else anyway. They're the ones who are already left-leaning, and their people are already lining up to inject me harder, daddy. Whereas the places maybe Arkansas will try something like that. I don't know if you saw what their governor said. He said he regretted pushing and passing and writing and signing off on a bill that banned mask mandates. He wants it repealed because he thinks it's time to bring back the mask mandates. And some people might go, but it's Arkansas, and he's a Republican, and if you got any more red, they would call the cops. If Arkansas was any more red, they call the cops when they see a Democrat on the street kind of red. But then you have to ask, is Asa Hutchinson running for re-election? No, he's not. He has nothing to lose politically by pushing this. He just gets more control of his people for it. So if he tried to do a vaccine mandate, though, what would happen? Who would be the one enforcing it? Would it be the state police? No, they don't have enough people to do it. They'd have to put the burden on the county sheriffs and the city police. Do you think that the sheriff do you think the National Guard's going to want to do that? Maybe the infantry dudes won't. I mean, maybe the Louisiana National Guard is okay with that. They were taking people's guns during Katrina. But
I mean, it's
do you
hard
think
to really
you think the sheriffs would
determine.
let them do that? Because the sheriffs would just tell the National Guard, no, get the fuck out, and it would be blood
Well, I
between
see.
them. But a lot of the Arkansas National Guard would just be like, yeah, we went to these people's houses and they said they were already vaccinated.
We've spoke about this before. It's hard to really tell how the military would do. Now, all right, when we were in, I would 100% agree that we would tell someone to get fucked. Like that just wouldn't happen. But now, I don't think so.
I don't know about that even when we were in. I used to go around asking people all the time. The simple question: if you got told right now to go to your hometown and enforce martial law, including confiscation of weapons, what would you do? And like 40% of people told me that they'd be fucking hard for it. They'd love to do it, which makes me want to vomit.
It depends on what
That's-
city they're on. Like if they're from New York City, if they asked me to
I mean-
go to New York City for martial law, yes sir, let's shut it down.
Right, I mean-
they can't vote anymore. Done. I know
Yeah.
you'd be happy with that, Harris.
someone-
Hey, we might get a Republican to win.
I specifically framed the question with their hometown. So, you know, not a lot of people from New York City are actually joining, you know?
That's true.
They're too busy talking tough, but then when asked why they didn't join, I would have punched a drill sergeant in the face or some dumb shit.
All right, 40%. Yeah, that's bad. I would argue it's more now.
Sure.
Which is
Well,
why, like, even like talking about the National Guard, right? When they were down in DC, I know dudes that are in the National Guard. When they were down in DC, they were sending people home because of their pro-Trump, Facebook stuff, or not even just pro-Trump, pro-Constitution stuff, which tells you that obviously the National Guard in and of itself is compromised.
Well, whatever state
Still.
they came from.
Yeah, but
I do want to point out though, Los Angeles, they lifted their mask mandate, and then like 6 weeks later or something, they reimposed it. And when they reimposed it, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department wrote a long-winded letter, basically saying, yeah, like we kind of agree that this should be a thing, kind of, sort of. But like, hey, actually, you guys have taken away like a good chunk of our funding, and we can't actually afford to enforce this, so we're not going to. And that's Los Angeles. I mean, that's Los Angeles, and of course, the police is always going to be more conservative than the population.
But even look at how the way that's worded, right? What happens if they do have the funding?
Then they totally do it.
Yeah.
See,
Yeah,
like
The shit,
It's-
like individual police members might be individually conservative, but being conservative doesn't put food on their table.
Well, you know
Obeying
what?
the orders from their political masters does.
And the political masters in that case, like, I'm so sorry, I'm going to get us demonetized again, but it is the unions, dude. The
Being
unions
demonetized is a circle. You eventually get demonetized so hard you get your
100%.
money back. It's just it comes from Alex Jones now.
Oh, selling them fucking penis pills.
Yeah, but Alex Jones is the tip jar labeled Alex Jones was right is so full of quarters he can afford to give us a few.
Yeah, you're right.
That's fair. But
I like to remember I don't know if you guys remember the Bundy standoff with the Bureau of Land Management. The first BLM that sucked. There comes a question where how many guns can you bring to bear against the government where they decide even they can't do it? Because sure, the National Guard shows up and they go, okay, time for y'all to get vaccinated. And then Bundy brings his crew with a bunch of rifles and 50 cals and whatever else they can get on hand. They go, get fucked.
Now,
How many National
to
Guardsmen
be
are standing there
fair-
going, I don't want to die over a vaccine for a disease that has a 99.9% survival rate. This is fucking stupid.
I was gonna
It won't
say,
be the Joes who call it off. It'll be that commander going, I like getting a paycheck, but I like not having sucking chest wounds more.
Well, I mean, we've also those photos of those guys at the Iraqi border taking a photo op just to get combat patches. So
You did see
I don't
that,
know.
right, Gilbert?
Yeah, I did. I
But-
gotta say, like, I'm kind of sort of offended because, like, I do have my combat infantry badge, but I
right,
never,
like I have my shit. and
we
these
earned
Wait,
motherfuckers
let me finish my thought. I never pulled my trigger, so
are-
You didn't. Fucking free IB club over here.
yeah. I mean, like, I got shot at, but I never, I was a driver. What am I supposed to do? You
You did pull your
in the
trigger.
truck.
It's called the gas pedal. Burn it on,
Yes,
bitch.
so true, dude. I got mine like 6 weeks after everybody else got theirs, even though it was for the same event. because I was the driver and never got the opportunity to pull the trigger, it had to go through like extra review or something like that before they would give it.
That's fucking retarded.
Either that or like the CO declined it when the LT put it up, and then remember the CO got kicked out and they got a new CO in. I think Lieutenant Jacobs might have resubmitted it under the new CO. Something like that.
God, why do you have to remind me that Captain Boudreaux existed?
I don't remember their names. I don't even remember their fucking faces.
I just remember him because they sell Boudreaux butt paste as a anti-diaper chafing cream for babies. And I'm like, this is the second shittiest thing with Boudreaux's name on it. The first one being his uniform when he wears it.
Nice.
Because he left the 240 behind on the battlefield. And then someone pointed it out and they went back and got it back. Fuck, guy, come on.
Oh, man. Fun times.
See, that's a dude who should be an experimental test subject for a COVID vaccine right there.
But so I think that the problem with what you're discussing from a logistical point of view is like, yeah, sure, it works when you can get all these people together, right? And this is like a common criticism of anarchy, right? Like, well, what about when when the company comes to your rural estate? What are you gonna fucking do? You're gonna get the fucking injection, right? So because you can't always have enough people around you to protect yourself.
Well,
so you'll end up with like bastions of resistance, but the majority of the country is still going to get got because the mobilization and capabilities of these military units is so good.
Well, not even that. Biden's already admitted that there's a list of everyone who hasn't been vaccinated. So, right? So let's say they want to get you vaccinated. They declare a national emergency or whatever, or a state of emergency if it's for state to state, and it's not done at the federal level. And then all you do is get, your fucking door kicked down by the National Guard. You dragged out of your house just to get a fucking shot.
Bro, if they drag me out of my house just to give me a shot, I'm going to be so pissed. Why can't they just come into my house and stab me there, bro? Like, what the fuck?
They wouldn't even have to come into your house. They could just tempt you to come outside with, I don't know, free donuts or something, and then just shoot you with a tranquilizer gun with the vaccine in it.
Yeah.
Because, I would agree, if a company of National Guardsmen set up in your town, and you were just to do vaccines, and you were like, no, and you showed up armed with a bunch of your friends, they'd probably dick off. But there's a list. They know who you are.
Alternatively, why would you present yourself to them? Why would you not instead just walk away from your house and then, I don't know, put a couple 100 pounds of tannerite with a pressure plate underneath your front porch? So when they come up and go, sir, we're the COVIDian witnesses, they turn into powder. Or just even you let them inject you, but then you start hitting them in midnight ambushes.
That's true. But
you can't do that because we all know full well, 100% completely accurate statement that I'm about to make, that each one of these doses has GPS chips in them. You can't hit them in midnight ambushes. They're going to have the Blue Force tracker up, and they're going to see all these spots around.
You couldn't get the rest of it out as soon as you said Blue Force tracker. That's okay. Right? I've got a Faraday bag. I'll just wrap my arm in it and we'll be good to go.
No, that's why you
can't track me if you can't get a signal out of me.
That's why you just gotta get rid of the vaccinated. Right? If they're vaccinated, they are a liability to you and your people. That's just what it is.
Yeah, but then you end up going back to that 71% number. You're not gonna have a successful United States with only 29% of the population left alive. I mean,
let's just start producing babies now.
You could.
Okay, all right. Maybe you could. But
define successful. Define successful for me.
Okay, so,
in the modern industrial sense, no. As a country with a coherent culture and ideology, yes, you totally could. It would be far more agrarian.
I'm going to define a successful in capable of fending off a Chinese invasion.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
We wouldn't need 10% of the population. As long as that 10% is motivated and capable of effective defense, you can still do it with that. The real problem would be manufacturing ammunition, food, the beans, bullets, bandages.
Right. Which, by the way, has been a problem even with 300 million Americans.
But now you loot the other dead 80%. The boomers that thought they needed 1 million rounds of 22 to defend their home, but not more insulin injections for their diabetes. How many loot drops are going to be sitting around America dead with their cats licking them to death, but they've got a safe full of guns and you've got a blowtorch?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, I know.
Or they were dumb and couldn't remember the combination and they wrote it on a sticky note they put on the side of the safe. Sweet, free money.
Okay, so I think that that these vaccine passports, I believe that they are a demonstration of hate, specifically because with the way that they're being marketed by the state right now, and by mega corporations also, they are definitely culpable.
But you repeat yourself.
Amen, dude. Is fundamentally that 71% is going to be smaller, going to be larger and larger, and so therefore the other 29% is going to be smaller and smaller, and so you know it is very difficult for Democrats to ostracize all Republicans, right? Because there's 75 million Republican voters and probably another 20 million people, 30 million, 40 million people leaning that way.
Not just
But
that, but opposition to vaccine mandates are actually a bipartisan issue. It completely crosses political party
opposition
lines.
to it?
Yeah,
Well,
like
that's
the majority of people overall are against it, and yeah, more Republicans are against it than Democrats, but it's a majority of every group.
But I mean, so that's an optimistic perspective for sure. But I think that ultimately, especially if we maybe accept the premise that the majority of people pushing for the vaccine passports are going to be left leaning people with their left wing ideology, incorporating the CRT and wokeism and socialism, Marxism, communism, whatever you want to call it. All of those
all
people,
the isms.
those are the people that are going to be pushing for this vaccine
All but the
mandate.
only good ism, which is jism.
And if their fundamental argument can be boiled down to the proletariat versus the elite, and then more loosely defined, the proletariat is always going to be the majority, and the elite is always going to be the minority. And obviously, people are gullible to this perspective. Then it doesn't even matter if it's literally the unwashed masses. It's literally they're not because they're vaccinated, so they have been washed. They are the washed masses, and they're going to be seeking to. Right? I know. It's a wild fucking world out there. But and
Properly hygienic vest.
and so how easy
Can't say it.
will it be for that group of people to weaponize their ideology against the minority population? And how ironic would it be also, of course. I personally think it would be really easy because I think that a huge portion of America within our generation specifically, and because I do think the younger generation is pushing back against it like innately, but I think that our generation really bought into it wholesale, like almost entirely. Looking back at my acquaintances from high school, bro, it's like 80-20 at least, and I grew up in a conservative suburb of Los Angeles.
Yeah, I think it would be about the same for mine.
So
well.
how easy will it be for them to direct the mobs into violence against these 20 people? How I believe then that this vaccine passport is a demonstration of hate because I do believe that it will eventually lead to outright ostracization, persecution of the unvaccinated, a la, by the way, much like the Libertarian Party of Kentucky, GOP of Oklahoma, just a couple days ago, last week or whatever, they made the same comparison: unvaccinated, yellow star.
It's going to be a direct return to Jim Crow. It's going to be the largest group of people that's unvaccinated. Like 65% of them are black people. So this is going to be used as a way to put black people back in jail. This time for doing literally nothing wrong. It's literally they're not doing anything wrong. It's not like dealing crack in the hood, which actually has bad effects. It's not like running prostitutes. It's not like gangbanging. It's just straight up. No, I don't want your fucking vaccine, honky. Like, okay, and now.
I mean, that's why I think it's going to lead to, because all you need for them to do is to maintain the narrative that the unvaccinated are why the vaccinated are getting sick. Doesn't matter how fucking dumb that sounds, as long as that is maintained, the need for those passports will increase. And yeah, it will be eventually 1930s Germany all over again, except in this
So
case.
can we get the far right beatdown of the communists? I'm looking forward to that part.
Well, I mean,
Where's the disaffected painter and war hero coming to be president?
see, I think that it is not 1930s Germany. I think it's 1910s Russia, where I mean, ultimately, I mean, people. It's a criticism all the time of the modern right or the GOP that they're basically Democrat light. Right now, I know in Steve Deace's conceptualization of the GOP, it's not necessarily that, but I think it's kind of a common criticism. And so I do think it's more like Bolshevik Russia or versus the Mensheviks
No,
because it's basically it's two groups.
that's pretty much that's his conceptualization of the GOP. Dave says that the way the GOP tends to function is that they don't actually push the Overton window to the right because they're so busy focused on their own corporate interests that they let the Overton window get dragged to the left. And the only way they do that is if they're stupid or they're complicit. And stupid people don't stay successful for that long consistently within their
So
own party.
so
So they're complicit
okay.
in it.
So there you go. So you can see the Republicans and the Democrats as the Mensheviks and the Bolsheviks respectively. Those were two communist groups fighting each other in Russia. Who's going to win out of the commie versus the commie? It's going to be the fucking commie, right? And so that's why I can kind of see it leading down towards a violent interaction with the unvaccinated. Now, if it turns out that in fact, when all is said and done, 65% of the people that get murdered because they're not vaccinated turn out to be black, well, then at least there will probably be some sort of political reckoning or taking place over the course of the next 150 years after that for that ideology. Because they're the group of people that always say that they are pushing for helping POC, and then there they are outright murdering them.
I mean, maybe, unless ultimately that is their end goal.
Well, yeah, I mean, if we accept the party swap as a myth, which I think we all do, then yeah, there's this group of people that were racist are still racist, and yeah, I mean, they did eugenics in the early 1900s.
Yeah,
and they
like they've learned that
strung and lynched black people for decades and decades.
And now they've made black eugenics or not classy. They made it popular. They made it mainstream. It's called Planned Parenthood.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not killing them fast enough. So now they need to, speed up the process a little bit. Like look at like with Biden's whole fucking, the cigarette ban thing. Well, not the cigarette ban, but the menthol ban. Right? That primarily targets, the black population.
Well,
it's like, huh.
Did that ever actually happen?
I don't think it has yet.
The menthol ban.
No, my wife can't sell them at her store. They're banned. Well, you can't sell them. I don't think it's illegal to possess them.
See, it's crazy because like when I grew up, 18 was tobacco, and then at some point it turned into 19. I don't even remember the fuck that happening. And now
that must have been somewhere in one of your states because it was 18 here in Indiana until the menthol ban when it was raised to 21.
Okay, yeah, because now it's 21 nationwide. If I know right.
Yeah.
And it blows my mind that like you're allowed to go and get this was first brought to my attention by my dad when I joined the army. He's like, oh yeah, you can go and die, but you can't drink a beer. So I'm gonna buy you a beer at this restaurant even though you're not 21 yet. It's absolutely asinine that we can literally give up our life, but we can't risk our life with poor vice choices. It's just wild. So like the level of control that these people have, or desire or seek, it's absolute crazy. So how do we go about
avoiding this?
Yeah, overcoming them? I mean, because I think that it will spread to a majority of the urban centers. I think that somewhere like Oklahoma, it's gonna not happen. I'm not concerned about it happening here.
Like the vaccine passports, you have to ensure that the people you have who would be the ones both like pushing for it and then enforcing it are the people who are going to be hostile to it in the first place. You have to make sure you have actual conservative or libertarian governors, mayors, councils, sheriffs, law enforcement, all of them who are just going to go, nah, we trust our people to make their own decisions.
Well, I was going to say, if you look at like the voting maps, right? Most of the major population centers are, primarily leaning left leaning. So they'll probably be the ones to pass it first. But then look at how those cities dictate what way a state goes.
Yeah, like New York. So, and you do bring up a good point, because I was stunned that we here where I live got a mask mandate at all. I mean, we got a one in the city, but the mayor said he wouldn't enforce it. Like they wouldn't prosecute. But then businesses stepped up and basically did the enforcement, which made me really disappointed. And so I
Well, it
guess,
also goes back to, the fear thing. Fear is,
oh yeah,
ultimately, it's the best way to like control somebody.
my experience at the VA the other day, dude. They tried their hardest to put the fear of COVID into me, and I was just. They're like, we're overloaded. We're all on standby. I work in dermatology, but I might get called down to work in the emergency room at any minute. And meanwhile, they've got like the dermatology clinic at any VA is filled with highly vulnerable people, and
Right? And
it's
you're like, why would you be involved with COVID patients when you're working with people who are like compromised in the worst possible way?
well,
The funny thing is, the people I know in medicine as nurses who are dealing with the COVID issues, they point out that the reason they are quote unquote overloaded is not because the beds are full, but because they're short staffed, because a lot of these hospitals keep firing nurses who won't get vaccinated. Like,
right.
so it's so bad that
see-
you can afford to fire your nurses. That's you're telling me something wrong here.
That's where I think where we might avoid bloodshed, because we see that here, right? Cuomo announced that all hospital staff,
September 1st, right?
have to be vaccinated. They have no room to do, they have to be vaccinated. They can't do weekly testing. So a lot of these hospitals are already understaffed, and they're already giving people, their 2 weeks notice. And I'm pretty sure this is going to result in maybe the cultural shift that we're looking for. Maybe. I mean, we could hope. Because, like, imagine, working through COVID and not wanting to get the vaccine for whatever reason it is you have, and then to turn around and get a notice from your place of work telling you if you don't get the vaccine, we're going to have to let you go.
More evidence that the vaccine issues on both sides are they cross the aisle. You guys know the Washington Examiner, right? One of the major newspapers in the U.S. Would you consider that right or left leaning generally?
I don't read it enough, but I would probably guess right wing.
Yeah, it's a little more right leaning than most. It's not like the Washington Post. They are requiring all employees to provide proof of vaccination to their HR department by today. If not, you have to wear a mask at all times, anywhere in the place. You also can't use kitchen areas, be present in any conference room or training room. So that's going to explicitly divide their workforce into people. It's going to balkanize them, because then there's the people who can pursue advancement because they can be in conference meetings, they can pursue additional training, and they can be treated like human beings. And then you're going to have the peasants with their masks on who are just going to eventually get fired unless they successfully bring a lawsuit to them over it, which I don't know if a judge will even side with them on that, because COVID's so scary right now.
Well, it's not even that. Like
if the right-leaning organizations are doing this, what hope do a lot of allegedly red areas have? Like places where the governor doesn't have to worry about any blowback politically because he's not running for re-election. So like Asa Hutchinson, or guys that are full-blown COVID or branch Covidians like Mike DeWine in Ohio, who basically writes sonnets to COVID. Do you think he's going to say no to that when push comes to shove? No, he's going to try and enforce it. It's going to be his people that stop him.
Do you think that in 2022 we will get a large slew of anti-COVIDians elected into the gubernatorial positions? Because I mean, people like Kristi Noem and Ron DeSantis, they're very, very, very popular. And so why wouldn't more wannabe politicians run on those platforms if they're
we might not see it in 2022, but maybe 2023, because we still have to wait to see what the effects are of the vaccine.
Bro, honestly, I won't lie. If this shit is still going on in 2023, I don't know. I might have an aneurysm or something.
If this is still going on in 2023, I'm packing up my family. We're moving to Poland.
Right? If this
Or
shit's still going on,
The Czech Republic just added a constitutional amendment to their own constitution that protects the right to keep and bear arms.
Nice.
So,
I mean, if
time to
this
run
shit
the
is
check.
still going on 2023, then this shit was engineered from the fucking get-go. Like, fuck out of here. God damn. But,
might as well start singing the Chinese national anthem at that point. Fuck.
right? I keep telling you, I gotta learn I serve the poo. I mean, I might die when I say it, but that's okay. But, I mean, we might see it in 2022, but I don't think we'll have enough data for it to be, I don't want to say a legitimate stance, but it's just going to be like one of those things that, they sit there and they're like, I'm an anti-COVID vaxxer. And then that's it. That's their
Well, no, not being an anti-COVID vaxxer, but being an anti-COVIDian, meaning like all of the stuff that comes along with COVID, mask mandates, lockdowns,
If you're an anti-COVIDian, you're just the guy who's skeptical of the things and want to see the data. Whereas the branch Covidians are the ones who are zealous about it. You have to wear 17 masks and get the injection directly into your balls types.
Right, but I'm asking, how many are we going to see new governors? Governors get replaced, like by governors that are running on an anti-COVIDian platform.
We could.
I don't. But they would have to have the same. I don't think so, except for the ones that are ending their terms anyway. I mean, who was the biggest proponent of the COVID vaccine during 2020? The guy who basically runs the GOP, Donald Trump.
They would have to
he's not a warrior on that issue either way.
Okay, but I'm not talking about being anti-vaccine. I'm talking about being anti all of the laws that are coming along with it.
Well, the vaccine mandate's part of that ball of wax. So if they're going to support a vaccine mandate, or even just encouraging it through, say, that lottery that West Virginia has, other states have, then
I'm asking about. Are we going to see more Ron DeSantis's, more Kristi Noem's elected? You guys keep saying no. I don't know. I don't see why not.
I misunderstood what you said. We could, but they would need to have like Ron DeSantis's charisma.
Are you pissing right now?
No, I was using the sink.
I don't think not just Ron DeSantis's charisma, because that does certainly help. They're going to need Ron DeSantis's organizational capability. Because you don't take over a party GOP by just running for governor on some good ideas and a bit of character. You have to have the actual party support to do it in the first place. And if the same people, say, running the Ohio GOP are the same ones that got Mike DeWine elected, do you think they're going to elect a Ron DeSantis to stomp all over their happy times and their gravy train? No, hell no. They're going to elect another Mike DeWine. They're going to make sure another Mike DeWine wins the primary so that he's the one who's picked. Because the average person is just going to see the R and hit that button. Or see the R and hit the Democrat button. It's just what most people do.
Hey, man.
So the question is, you got to put the good guy in that position so they hit the button. And make sure he doesn't suck, that he actually holds up to his values and doesn't McCain the entire thing. Hey guys, I'm a fiscal conservative. I don't believe in tax and spend policies. Wait, let me suspend my presidential campaign to pass TARP. Fuck you, John McCain. I hope you're burning in hell still. Abby?
But that also falls back to the percentage of Americans who don't actually give a shit. It doesn't matter. Like, does it really matter that, let's say Oklahoma gets somebody who is like a Ron DeSantis?
Oh, we got Kevin Stitt right now. He's passed basically all of the same legislation that Florida has. So I don't understand why Kevin Stitt doesn't get more limelight, because he's done basically all the same things that Ron DeSantis
does. Because he's not as loud as Ron DeSantis.
2 reasons. One, Ron DeSantis seems to be the replacement to Donald Trump in 2024 if Trump doesn't run.
Whipping boy.
You say that. Because he ran as the Floridian Trump, essentially. But 2, what state is generally considered one of the most important to American elections? Oklahoma or Florida?
Oklahoma, 100%. Dude, Oklahoma's way more important than Florida, dude.
That's Oklahoma.
Florida can suck Oklahoma's dick.
It's all that dust from the Dust Bowl getting caught in your brain. No, Florida's like the most impactful, consequential swing state in the United States.
Yeah, I know, dude. I was alive in the year 2000. I know.
Not just the stupidity of Florida occasionally not being able to correctly vote, but it's generally considered whoever wins Florida and Ohio is likely to win the presidency. And Mike DeWine is this spineless little cuck who loves COVID more than he probably loves his own wife, because his wife fucks probably other people probably. So Ron DeSantis is going to be the guy they look at. And when he's just like, nah, I'm not playing this moderate shit. We're going hard right on this. Fuck you.
Yeah,
that kind of stands out. Everyone expects Oklahoma to be red.
And in fact, it was the reddest state in the country in 2020.
It's like I could be the greatest baseball player in Indiana, but the moment I go into the Nationals, does that really mean shit? I'm just like one among many. Whereas Ron DeSantis is that top 5% guy. He is the Barry Bonds of conservatism. Well, maybe not Barry Bonds, because we don't know if Ron DeSantis has been doing drugs. But he's up there. He's got the name ID.
I don't necessarily see that. I you know, and it's funny because like I watch professional esports sometimes, and I'll be watching them, and I'll think to myself, I know I'm not good at this game, but it doesn't look like these people are good at the game either. And I kind of get that vibe. Like, who's to say that Kevin Stitt is not the equivalent of Ron DeSantis? And it's just that Kevin Stitt doesn't get the publicity because Ron DeSantis, as you rightly pointed out, is in charge of a much more divided state than Oklahoma is. And also, the media is just deciding to hyper-focus on it.
Well, he's also louder. Florida also has the highest.
Well, you say he's louder, but Ron Paul was loud as shit too. But still, almost nobody heard his message because the powers that be decided to never air his message.
So a bit of an exception to my statement, though, when you guys talk about Kristi Noem being another public figure, she's from an inconsequential state because it's a hard right one, but
and also, it only has two Congress members. Or 3 Congress members.
Yeah, all states have 3 at a minimum. But also,
right,
she's kind of hot for a politician at that level. So that might be part of that, too. That and the whole issue with Mount Rushmore and bringing President Trump there. Having Mount Rushmore there does give you some visibility. What major national monuments are in Oklahoma?
Well, Oklahoma City is like dead center of the entire state, of the entire country.
No one cares.
That's bullshit. That's bullshit.
How many Americans can't even find America on the map?
Well, that's true, but if you work for a big national company, like my sister works for Hyatt. She comes out to Oklahoma City for training. My brother works for some laboratory. He comes out to Oklahoma City for training. My little sister works for Sports Clips. She goes to Houston for training. But you know, that's like right there.
All I'm hearing is bad things. All I'm hearing is corporations are going to infect Oklahoma and turn it into the next Texas, and Texas is turning purple as we speak. That's all that sounds like to me.
Well, no, it's that they don't operate out of here. They come to here for national training. So that way, the people from the East Coast only fly halfway across the country. People from the West Coast fly halfway across the country.
But how many of those people are going to see this and go, man, I could probably afford a house here. It's nice and cheap, and it's relatively nice here. But man, if we only could get rid of those damn conservatives and their damn freedoms, yeah, we'll move here and we'll start voting Democrat. Maybe not.
Yeah, maybe
50%, maybe 10%, maybe 1%. But that's
a potential everywhere because every red state has a lower cost of living than every blue state.
That's why we have to keep them out. Like, you have to actively discourage them and scare them. I want to put signs around my neighborhood. Do you work in tech? Do you have a college degree? We don't want you here. Fuck you.
So how much is the wall around Indiana going to cost?
Right?
Every dead body in that wall is worth it.
So Harris, when are you coming to Oklahoma? When are you moving?
I'm figuring it out.
As soon as the Democrat Party lets him transfer.
Right? Like a part of me does have to wonder if you are being held there against your will because it's been so fucking long.
Blink twice if you're a prisoner. Wait, shit, we can't see you.
Oh, shit. No, soon, hopefully.
Okay, he's blinking in Morse code. It says send nudes. God damn it. Ultimately, I think the COVID fight is it's going to be normalized like flu by the time 2022 happens, because look how quickly masks died. Of course, it was the vaccines that partially did that. Well, but then there's going to be the booster shots, and then there's going to be another set of booster shots 6 months after that, and then we're going to be in the midst of the 2022 midterms. At that point, everyone's just going to think, yeah, everyone's gotten it by now, probably. Like, just as a subconscious thing. They're not going to actively voice that, and then it's just part of the background again.
And I also think that it will take a reflection of the counter actions states like Oklahoma and Florida and so on and so on have taken, where they're like banning mask mandates and they're banning requirements for this kind of stuff. Now, while I don't necessarily think that's necessary or appropriate, I kind of have mixed feelings about it with my political leanings, but I do think that like the only places that are going to really hammer down lockdown again on this are the blue states, and I also think that a lot of these people that live there are going to travel, and they're going to see that the rest of the country is not doing this, and the rest of the country is not dying in mass in the streets, and they're going to eventually disregard it coming from their own authority figures, because it so clearly does not map to reality. Unless they never travel, and then they're fucked.
You're
Well, that's
expecting
what
the demoralized people to not act demoralized. I think if they travel somehow, they're going to see the unwashed masses, so to speak, not wearing masks, not being vaccinated, and they're not
that's
going to
what
be
I
like, "Hey,
mean
there's nothing
by
wrong here," because they're different and they're totally fine. No, they're going to panic. They're going to freak out. You saw
I
videos of
mean,
it all last year. The Karens with the 17 masks on their face going up to big dudes, big healthy guys, and getting in their face. Well, yeah, I'm a man.
Well,
They're going to
sure.
continue to
to
do
be
that.
fair,
Those
They're
people
demoralized people.
those people are a minuscule fraction
Well,
of the total.
they're also the ones who are likely to travel and actually have an
I
opinion to voice on in the first place. The rest of people just don't
I
care. They just
think
want to go back to normal.
Dotson is right. I am in a household with how many other people? 1, 2,
Too many.
3. If I include her sister, that's 4. All right, 4 people. All
Are
4
you at
people
least banging her sister?
no. Ugh, she's crazier.
He's banging the grease
Anywho's,
on the couch.
anywho's, all 4 people are vaccinated, right? They have this bar mitzvah thing, and I want to say it's November, right? So November, bar mitzvah. They are all
Bar
thinking
mitzvahs
about.
happen every week, so I don't know when your friend's bar mitzvah is.
I think it's like before Thanksgiving. Anyway, they're all afraid to go because of the Delta variant.
That's
Like,
fine. That kid
like-
whose bar mitzvah it is going to remember that a good portion of their family was too cowardly to watch them grow up. Okay?
I don't know how that kid is raised, because he might also think, yeah, they had to make the decision that was right for their health. Or it might even be, wait, why is anyone showing up who's not vaccinated?
Well, because if nobody's showing up, then he doesn't do the bar mitzvah. Because in order to do the bar mitzvah, you have to have 10 Jewish men in the audience. It's called a minyan. It's a thing.
Why do I feel like you guys just make shit up?
Well, there is like
They've been doing that for several thousand years. Why do you think God keeps trying to smite them all?
there is a logistical reasoning for it. So I don't have to explain it necessarily, but I can tell you the flip side of that. So those are the urban, probably sincerely reformed Jews. But out here, I go to a Hasidic place, very conservative and Orthodox. And I went today. There was like 20 people there. A majority of them were roughly my age. A couple of older people. Nobody was wearing a mask. When I go on Saturdays, it's almost entirely old people, and some of them are wearing masks. But I have never been asked to put my mask on, and I don't think they ever will.
Well, I mean, they're also Hasidic Jews. They don't kind of do that shit.
Oh no, he will put a mask on. He will put, if he thinks one of his vulnerable people are in the place, he'll put a mask on. But he won't tell me to put a mask on. I'm not gonna fucking put a mask on.
Well, it's different. He's not going to go out of his way to say it to you. I mean,
except for that, there are shuls across the country that will.
Yeah, easily. But that's why I agree with Dotson, right? Like, I'm a household of 4 people. I'm the minority. And those people are afraid to travel. Now, if they do travel, it's going to be one of those things where they will be absolutely mortified that, this state doesn't have a mask mandate.
Well, why would they, if they're that scared, then why would they even visit the state in the first place?
Because they're entitled. I mean, why else would they do it?
Because your brain doesn't tell you that they think different than you. You just think of it as a nice vacation place. You don't think of it as having a character outside of touristy bullshit. You
Sure.
see
I mean, like,
touristy that everywhere. It's like, I don't think of Chicago as a place that has any value outside of, oh, I'm going to visit here once a year.
in Branson, they had basically like their way of just avoiding telling anybody what to do was simply by saying, we want you to follow the CDC guidelines, which then they explain says, if you have the vaccine, you don't have to wear a mask. Well, you know, they're not asking for verification. Who knows how many people are walking around that aren't vaccinated without masks? Who knows?
That's how my job is. So they're slowly having everyone re-wear masks, which I think is ridiculous.
DG hasn't tried that because they know if they did that, their HR manager would get shot.
Literally. I
I'm
carry
pretty
a
sure
pistol on me all
She
the time.
pissed everyone off because she fired an unloader who works for a company that's contracted to us. He doesn't even directly work for our company. Because she told him, this was shortly before the vaccines became commonplace, so they got rid of their mask mandate then. But right before then, she was walking the floor to check mask compliance, and he came out of a trailer that he was in by himself and didn't have a mask on him. And she was like, "Put on your damn mask." And he was like, "Okay, fine. You don't have to be a douchebag about it." And got him fired for that. If she starts saying, now you have to wear a mask even if you're vaccinated, somebody who's a gangbanger who works for us is going to pull out a fucking gun and shoot her.
So
I mean,
I think the other part of this is these the mask mandates, the COVID vaccination requirements, all of this stuff, plus the massive increase of the welfare state with the printing of like $1.8 trillion or whatever the fuck it's been, and with the delivery of all those stimulus checks, so on, so on, so on. All of that is culminating in not many places not being able to get enough workers. It's particularly food places, but I'm sure like Walmart's hurting and
my job.
your job. So at what point will the politicians or the workers themselves realize that it is actually incredibly harmful for their long-term job security for this stuff to be happening? Because if you can't staff the place, you can't run the place, you can't keep the place open, everybody loses their job. Like, at what point is that going to be a deciding factor in this conversation?
It'll be about the time the losses from their lack of sales due to lack of employees overtake the amount of federal benefits they get. It's a money issue.
Yeah.
At least for the corporations, it's a money issue.
All right. So, I mean, we could actually look at that now. Has that stopped hospitals from telling people, if you don't get the vaccine by X date, you will be fired? No, it hasn't stopped.
Hospitals are a different industry type and a different ball of wax when it comes to their interaction with the state and federal government.
Not really, though, because
like
they're already understaffed, right? Like, that was the whole point of flattening the curve, was to prevent the hospitals from being overwhelmed, because the hospitals are already understaffed. But here they are, a year later, threatening to fire those very same people because they're making a personal choice, which I think is a rather educated choice, to not get something because they don't think it's safe, or because they don't want it, whatever reason they have.
When we brought this up earlier, the thought that came to mind, it's not exactly an exact analogy, but it's Hayek's concept of the fatal conceit, which is more or less that you think you can control this by taking specific actions, but ultimately it is those specific actions that you are taking in an attempt to solve the problem, which will yield additional problems and compound it. So you have all this, like, there's a there's a medical field shortage. Well, let's fire people that aren't willing to be compliant and exacerbate the problem. Now, they're not seeing it as exacerbating the problem. They're seeing it as, oh, well, we want to make sure that these unvaccinated people aren't getting other people that are in the hospital for non-COVID related things sick with COVID, which maybe on the face of it makes sense. But when you get into the nuts and gritty of it, it doesn't make sense. And any attempt to try and finagle it in a way that does make sense is sincerely more harmful than just letting it be and letting each individual hospital figure that shit out on their own.
It's also disingenuous, though, because then you just basically have to lie to give your reasoning. right? Because what's going to happen, right? They're going to fire all these nurses, and we got the Delta variant right now. We're going to go into another lockdown because the hospitals are going to become overwhelmed. But it's not going to be because a hospital. Well, no, this time they actually might be because you're going to be woefully understaffed. Whereas before, I don't think there was like a single hospital that was ever over over capacity at any point during COVID, which is kind of
Well, and also,
ironic.
didn't a lot of hospitals like have mandatory like shelter in place kind of quarantines? So people weren't being sent home to quarantine at home; they were being kept at the hospital.
Yeah,
From what I know, a lot of people were straight up being told the hospital unless your symptoms are severe, because apparently we don't treat people in the early stages of illness anymore in the U.S. We wait till they're about to die and slap a ventilator on them.
And then ensure
well,
their
even
death
then,
through the ventilator.
a lot of the COVID deaths were coming from people who were put on a ventilator. So a lot of people just assumed that if you were put on a ventilator, you were just going to die. So it was better to not go to the hospital and just go at it.
And then I know a lot
That's
of
what my uncle did because he was afraid because he's older, but he's in good shape. But he was just like, it was real bad. But he was like, I knew people who went to the hospital, and the minute they put them on the ventilator, they just got worse. He was like, I wasn't dealing with that bullshit. I was like, fuck it.
all right. So to kind of sort of recap, the question, Lorenz, can we avoid bloodshed? I think we ended up with kind of a mixed feeling on that. I think we all want
I think
to.
it's
I
it's
think
a yes and no. There's just too many things that would have to happen for us to avoid it. And given the fact that most people are very complacent with things, it probably will.
I ultimately don't think there will be bloodshed. I'm just worried that our side of the argument won't use this opportunity to affirmatively push back, to start some momentum on taking things back to prevent long-term bloodshed. Because this could
But
be
we
a
also
pivot
need the
point.
right people to do that.
Yeah, I keep
Which
telling
we
people that
don't
if you
have.
want to take advantage of this moment, we have to start hijacking the city, county, state level GOP and or
We'll
convince
just
your
get
Democrat
Ethan
friends
in
to leave
office.
the Democrats and maybe go to the Libertarians even, because then you'll have three major parties. You'll have the Democrats and the LP kind of split in the minority, and the GOP being run by actual conservatives pushing
yeah,
the right side.
but you also know that the moment you get a swarm of left-wing people into the LP, you end up with a really unattractive party.
It becomes a diet
we end
Democrat.
up with we end up in
Wait,
the
a really
current
unattractive party?
situation the
You
LP's
mean like?
in.
Yeah, I was about to say you mean like the current Libertarian Party?
Not like the current Libertarian Party, but like the Libertarian Party of last year, because a lot of conventions have happened. A lot of states got swept by Mises. It's crazy impressive.
But anyway, yeah, if we don't take this opportunity to not just talk, like point out the hypocrisy and post spicy memes on Facebook, but actually not start taking over these state apparatuses, then we're just gonna. This is just gonna be a bump in the road towards the dustbin of history, where the violence will happen. But if we instead start affirmatively pushing back, we can forestall the violence. We could stop it long term because we can just start pushing the Overton window back towards the center and then maybe back towards the
But
right. And then we can have another swing 100 years from now. That'll be my grandkids' problem. I'll hopefully I've raised them smart enough, strong enough to be able to resist that crap.
So
do we want that?
peace and nonviolence. Yes,
I
yes,
want
please.
victory however it happens. I would prefer victory through peace over victory through war because I like not having to bury my children,
Well,
no matter what age they are.
that's why you fight it now, so then you don't
Exactly.
have to
We,
bury
we
your
fight it
children.
peacefully by taking over the
Uh,
political system instead of next generation
Ethan's like
forcefully
bloodshed
with
for doing
arms.
it.
No, not at all. I'm a very peaceful person. My whole shtick is the NAP, dude, the non-aggression principle. I do think though, it's not we need to start fighting it now. It's we needed to start fighting it in like the 70s and the 80s because that's when a lot
Yeah.
of this
That
stuff
was
really
that
started.
was the best time to fight it. The second best time is now, though.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I don't know about the second best. It's probably like however many days there are between whenever the best day to fight it was and now. That's what chance.
It's still a good day to fight it. It may not be the
Yeah.
best, but it's a good day to fight it.
So I'm actually going to take a slightly different approach. I'm going to say no violence, no bloodshed. I think it will ultimately come down to a proto civil war in that there will become two separate entities, maybe three separate entities, where you have a majority of the Eastern Seaboard with a couple of the Rust Belt states forming a new nation, Middle America and the South forming another new nation, and the Western Seaboard forming its own nation. I wouldn't be surprised if that's how this goes down, because why kill each other when we can just live separately? And I know that might sound like a highfalutin dream, but I'd like to believe that the lunatics that came out of the anti-war movement of the 60s and 70s has the potential still to have a peaceful settling of this whole thing. I say that, but it's kind of undermined, with California saying, oh, well, you don't let transgender people use whatever bathroom they want. So now we're not going to let any of our state employees attend anything in your state. That's war making nonsense, in my opinion. But I think that we'll end up with a division settled peacefully.
I mean, maybe.
I would love a national divorce right now. I would welcome it, as long as it's a true divorce and not the left gets all of the country, but the right half gets tax breaks, but they still get the left's cultural rot.
Right.
Well, and pray for a true divorce.
Well, this is also, I mean, we could also then in turn speculate what inflation's going to do.
I don't think we're going down the road of hyperinflation. The fact that we are the world reserve currency protects us from so much stuff. And I don't see...
not so much hyperinflation, just our current trajectory, which is definitely not great. Because I know, the guy who predicted the whole fucking housing market collapse is predicting that we're on our way to hyperinflation.
Well, this is where I put on my pretend monetarist hat and just say quantitative easing until you accept it as fact.
That's fair.
Excuse me, quantitative tightening, not easing. My bad. Because, people like Milton Friedman are the ones that talk about this, and they basically, by design, expand and contract the volume of money. They aren't doing it to the raw volume of money, but they're doing it to the volume of money that is added to the previous volume of money every year, and expand and contract. So it gives the feel of inflation and deflation, but in theory, it's relatively stable with a set inflation over the course of time. And, we saw that reflected in our paychecks when we were in the Army. Every single year, we got 1.8, 2.6% more.
Did we?
Yeah. It's a statutory raise that's part of military pay scales to keep up with inflation and increases in cost of living.
Yeah, every year. And it varied from year to year.
It's actually a big deal when they don't include it in that year's national defense bill, because we're like, well, now our spending we get less money than we're supposed to because our dollar's worth less.
It's the invisible tax. It is the method of theft. So, is there any particular rule of political warfare that we should try to... you've said, I think, number 10 for sure, play offensive. I think we've kind of already let the boat sail on 7, define your opponent before they define themselves. I think that all of this framework, as you pointed out, kind of sort of set up by the Trump administration, and it's inherently pro-vax passport. So...
yeah, we let them define the conversation at the beginning because one half of the country wanted to believe that this was a good intention thing.
Well,
and even I was part of it at the very beginning. I was like, well, it's a new virus. We don't know what to do. Masks might work. I don't know. I hope they make a vaccine for it.
I think arguably right now
they went crazy, but most people didn't see it that way.
We've lost almost every rule. They haven't played. We've been defensive. We haven't stayed on message. Well, not we, but Republicans.
It could also be because I think there has been a consistent message from the right wing or anti, but it's not.
I mean,
is it the right message? Because like
well, that's
if
fair.
ever like Keely
Well,
pointed
like,
out to me the
even
other day that people screaming about not wearing masks are functionally equivalent in her argument. I don't necessarily agree as the people screaming at you to wear a mask. And so if all the right wing is getting hooked up on is, oh, well, they want us to wear masks, I'm going to scream and cry about it. Well, then you let all that other stuff kind of just happen.
All of the mask rallies I went to back in 2020, they personally did not care if you wore a mask to the rally. They were just against the mandates. So the right wing talking point on this has been, we're against mandates. You do what you feel is best for your health. And the left is, fuck your choice. You do what we tell you.
But they
That's
also
been the
left
argument.
wing.
But they've been able to define their argument as the compassionate one, and because they've been able to define it that way,
I think
they definitely lost on that ground.
I think they frame it as the compassionate one because not because they have a genuinely compassionate argument in any capacity, but because they have framed the right wing thing as they don't say wear a mask if you want to, we don't care, just we're not going to force anyone to wear a mask. They say, well, no, actually nobody should be wearing masks at all. That's the way the right wing argument is framed for these people.
Yeah, because the left frames the right to argue, or the right as killing grandma if they're not for 100% masking and vaccines and everything else. They got the right never actually affirmatively took the moral high ground, so the left took it.
Even though the most dangerous thing to old people was
definitely are part of them. Yeah. It's all the crazy white ringers in New York City, all 5 of them.
Well, even DeSantis is guilty of breaking Rule 8, right? Always make your opponent defend their record and belief system, right?
I mean, he does a pretty good job of attacking the left on their belief system. He does a pretty good job of defending them from it, but he still supports vaccines. He just doesn't support a mandate on it.
But he doesn't do enough. Like, he could sit there and be like, this is why I don't have a mask mandate, and literally show that mask mandates don't work. And he could use Los Angeles and New York City, or even all of New York and all of California, if he really wanted to, or any state that has a population, a larger, older population that is similar to how his demographic is, and to show how a mask mandate literally did nothing. Rather than just being like, no mask. Because he's not forcing anyone to defend, like, he's not forcing Cuomo to sit there and defend his mask mandates.
No, but he has no leverage to. So
he's loud enough, though, and he gets more than enough media. Dude, he gets enough media coverage.
If Cuomo doesn't have to answer to molesting 11 women and killing roughly 30,000 seniors, like,
listen, they don't care about the fucking old people.
Why would they? Why would he give a flying fuck what DeSantis is challenging him to prove? He'd just ignore it.
To be fair, Cuomo doesn't even care about the sexual harassment either. So
exactly, that's my point. Why would he care about what Ron DeSantis is trying to challenge him to prove?
Well, because Ron
DeSantis doesn't have to challenge Cuomo. He has to challenge the Floridian Cuomos. That's who he has to challenge on the belief system. And the way he talks about other issues, not just COVID, he does a pretty good job at doing that. And he's one of the few major figures in modern conservatism, air quotes, that actually does that. Because the rest of the conservatives, they'll either run and hide, or they'll say, well, I don't want to cast aspersions on my opponent, or they'll just talk about tax breaks all day.
But, all right, the reason why I know Cuomo, if DeSantis went after Cuomo, the reason why I know Cuomo would go after DeSantis is because Cuomo went after Trump, because Trump went after him.
Yeah, but
DeSantis actually goes after his real opponent. He goes after Biden, because that's who his likely opponent is going to be, or the Biden successor in 2024 if Trump doesn't run.
Yeah, but
that's
even
why
then,
he spends more of his energy on Biden than DeSantis than Cuomo. Think of the word.
The GOP is just going to run like a Mitt Romney, right?
They're going to attempt to, certainly. The question is, do we have the organizational capacity to stop the Mitt Romney? Well, honestly, I think Nikki Haley's the one they're going to select as their Mitt Romney type, which actually isn't half bad. If the Mitt Romney of the GOP in 2024 is Nikki Haley, we've moved the Overton window to the right. Not as far as I want, but any movement is good as long as it's consistent.
She's gonna any votes she gains from being a woman get immediately lost by her very staunch pro-Israel stance.
Well, the only people I can find of in all of Congress that are staunchly anti-Israel are also Muslim, or AOC, who's a hedonist. So,
Well,
yeah,
she's a piece of
it,
shit anyway.
it's one of the few bipartisan things in the government, which should always be the thing that makes everyone scratch their head, like, why do they suddenly agree on this?
Well, but the public is not representative of that. So,
Oh.
in my personal opinion, the left wing voting bloc is very anti-Israel.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because even left-leaning Jews are anti-Israel, which is kind of weird.
As I told the rabbi, a lot of these people, in my opinion, are suicidal by nature.
Maybe.
If only they
Should
would
I
actually
ask
do it. Fucking cowards. Now we're demonetized.
Fucking do it. No,
No,
said it near. We're saying it near the end. It doesn't count.
Dude, anybody that says I'm not going to have any kids, that is de facto suicide.
It's genetic suicide. You're advocating for the end of your own line.
Yeah. So if you are advocating for more or less the genocide of Jews as a Jew, how is that not the same?
I mean, it is. It's virtually identical. But to be fair, there are some people who shouldn't have kids, and their genetic line should end with them.
Bro,
Actually,
you don't know
probably
that?
should end before that.
There were two subsistence farmers in India in the middle 1800s. Okay, subsistence farm, dirt poor, not ever been educated a day in their generation, zero education, zero prestige for anything intellectual, and then this couple birthed a fucking math genius who completely revolutionized the field of mathematics. And it is possible for any combination of genetics to bear a genius. Except for
it's a combination of nature and nurture in that old, stupid, pointless argument over what's more supreme in a child's upbringing. Is it nature or nurture? The answer is yes. It's both. Like my grandparent, I had a discussion with my grandma the other day. She's been a lifelong Democrat except for like the last 20 years, and she's in her 70s now because she was always taught that it's the Democrats who care for the working man. Just time and circumstances and the environment they're exposed to can completely make the kids completely against what their parents are. Otherwise, you wouldn't see an increase in LGBT populations. It just wouldn't happen because it's a social thing.
It's also why you see union workers in the Rust Belt voting red in 2016, but union workers everywhere else voting blue. It's because the union workers in the Rust Belt saw that this type of governance is poor and it leads to bad results, whereas everybody else, they're still living in the high life because they're still looting the billion-dollar companies that are sticking around, and as they leave they're going to get poorer and poorer, and eventually they're going to start voting red too,
or have what happened in 2020 with all the pipeline workers that voted blue.
Exactly.
And then what was that? 48 hours later, they all lost their jobs with a stroke of a pen. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
I mean, I don't want to say they had it coming, but
I mean, they did.
You reap what you sow, so whatever.
I mean, the dude literally said he was gonna stop doing all of that as a campaign promise. And you guys should look at this NPR article I'm about to send. Why reports of menstrual changes after COVID vaccine are tough to study.
Is it because women are bipolar and insane already?
Yeah, probably. Expected.
If I had to guess, because I'm not going to go all the way through this article in the time we have, how much of it is what's it called, mass psychogenic illness, where enough people believe a thing will happen due to exposure to something that it then happens on its own. You see the same thing with people who claim to have Wi-Fi sensitivity. Yeah.
So this is interesting. They have
they haven't collected
140,000
much data.
reports. They basically, it's just them saying they have no idea.
There could be multiple different factors to it, but there's also recency bias. I don't know if they actually talk about that, but I've argued it before when people talk about how there's suddenly so many more storms and hurricanes and tornadoes than there were before. It's like, well, how good were they at documenting them in the 1900s?
It gets reported. Yeah,
exactly. That's why we think plane crashes are so common, because they make the news. They're extraordinarily rare.
Well, yeah, I had someone try and argue that, storms are getting stronger, right? And I was just like, no, you can actually look up, like, the data, and you can see that storms aren't getting stronger. They're getting weaker.
The funny thing is, they'll talk about the weird thing is the areas they can hit have higher property values overall now because there's just more property there, and yet the property damage has been decreasing. That might be because the storms are weakening. It might be because we've gotten better at building against those storms. It might be because we got government out of the way. So wait, no, that didn't happen. That never happens.
Well, no, you have the better building. There's a whole list of things, but it's largely because the storms are getting weaker. And whenever you do get a quote-unquote strong storm, look at how hyper-focused the media gets on it, and they spend 4 weeks talking about it. They did that with, what was that? The last hurricane that hit the southern coast.
Hurricane fuck it, let's trash Florida again?
Yeah, one of the fucking ones where they just, hyper focused on it, and they were like, this is a super strong storm, and you're like, I think they've had worse. And that's just all they talked about, was for 2 weeks straight was that fucking storm.
Why do you think so many people enjoy watching the fear porn?
I don't think they really enjoy it. I just think it's captivating. If they were able to turn off the part of their brain that demands they watch it, they would. Well, it's just the part of the brain that demands. It's called negativity bias. You have there's the part of your lizard brain that wants to survive in a cave dealing with dinosaurs or whatever the fuck we dealt with. I'm not a prehistoric guy.
You're more likely to notice negative things than positive things because it's easier to see the negatives.
It's not just easier; it's more critical to your survival. The thing, ancient hunter-gatherers needed to know what berries were poisonous, not what berries were delicious. Because you don't have to eat delicious food to live; you have to avoid poisonous food.
Well, I mean, I think that has to do with abundance. Because if you identify a delicious berry and you have an infinite supply of it, then you don't really care what the poisonous berries are because you're going to exclusively eat the delicious berry.
We're far away enough from scarcity as an existential issue that we need to find a way to evolve our minds past that, or at least be able to consciously think away from that, and that takes time and effort. There's something I was reading the other day. I'd have to bring it up again if I could find it. There's a 3-step solution to countering negativity bias, and it takes time. Just give me a sec. I'll find it.
Well, it takes work, because it's like, I mean, I'm going to say it. When you go to a therapist and or not even when you go to a therapist, when someone asks you, what's a positive thing about you? And I'm sure
smarter than everybody else.
You think you are. But usually...
I know I am, motherfucker.
But usually, when someone you're asked that question, you sit there and you can only come up with one thing. But if someone turned around and was like, can you give me something negative about you? Not only do you have a list in your head, it's a varying degree of stuff.
That's because the list the negative, when somebody asks you something negative about yourself, you spend time and effort every day of your life, consciously and subconsciously, trying to make yourself better. So you have identified all these things that are in fact negative characteristics. But when it comes to positive characteristics about yourself, you go to
you're already refined in those areas. You don't need to work on them,
and it's a little bit more difficult for you to identify them. But also, what did I just do? I went straight to the extreme, which maybe I believe, maybe I don't. But that's not something I'm gonna say in a polite conversation, right?
Oh, no, your thing actually works. It's part of the 3-step trick called notice, shift, rewire. You notice the negativity bias, you catch yourself in that moment, you shut it off. You shift to a moment of gratitude, or in your case, self-aggrandization, and then you rewire your brain by staying in that space consciously over time. Like they say, it takes about 15 seconds for a thought to fully embed itself in your mind. So you stay in that mindset for at least 15 seconds, and you keep doing that every time it happens, and you stop
That's time for
focusing on the
Ethan. You
negative
can't
so
do
much.
that.
Is
But
this
that
how
you still have
mantras come into like? Is this a mantra? Should I just say to myself repeatedly, "I'm smarter than everybody else," like for 15 seconds? Is that what you're saying?
You can huff your own farts all you want if you want, Ethan. But this is America. It's a free country.
But
I'm sure there's an
I
entire
think
segment on Pornhub for that.
I just think us as a species fixate on negative things.
Well, I
It's
you
like,
know, I
but
think
that's why in the news, they sprinkle some of the good because they've learned that too much negative fucks everybody up. So you got to put in the feel good stories in there to give those dopamine releases, so then you're not too fucked up.
I
But I
won't
also
lie.
think that's why a lot of people are like fucked up
Yeah, the
in the
big
head.
major national news guys, they don't really do the nice guy stories, the good moment of
Anymore,
the day
anyways.
shit. Yeah, the
Well, even
local
like,
ones do.
even like the nice shit, it's like dumb.
Or
Like,
they'll do
oh
the nice
yeah, look at
shit.
this.
Like it's either
Look at
petty
this.
or it advances their narrative. They will not
Yeah.
come out like you're not going to see MSNBC and say Trump came out and did this nice thing because the one
No,
time
you'll
one
see
of them
like a
tried that, they got
story,
fucking shellacked publicly for it.
or you'll see like this 4-year-old kid drew this thing, and you're like, oh yeah, that's cute, like whatever, and then it's like immediately, triple homicide, and you're like, oh okay, that's what I'm fucking talking about.
So I kind of in that same space that you're talking about in regards to the negative bias and trying to overcome it. I have something I'm sure I've discussed with you guys in the group chat or whatever, but something that's been bothering me about my summer semester of school. Okay, when I am writing my papers, I'm thinking to myself, this is an okay paper. I maybe deserve a B plus, maybe an A minus. And then I turn it in and I get 100% on it. And then I look and see that the average score was an 80% and the lowest score was like a 40%. So now I need to overcome this idea. Like, it was my writing really B plus, or was it actually 100 points worth? How
Well,
is my analysis of my writing more or less valid than the educators?
well, you're also looking at your own work, so you're going to be a little bit more like, that's why artists are as good as they are, because they can look at their own like art piece and see what they did wrong, whereas you would look at it and be like, oh wow, it's really good, whereas they'll be like, oh wow, I fucked this little thing up, or this isn't right, or I didn't shade this right. So when they go back to do it again, they like build upon that.
Okay, but what about when I go back and I write a paper that, in my opinion, is a 100% paper, A plus? I make spicy points delivered in a polite way, and it's just a fire paper through and through. And then I turn that paper in and I get a 60% on it. So,
Well,
what do I, how do I reconcile those two realities?
it's also because someone's reviewing it based off of what you're writing.
You're trying to, as a subjective person, trying to create an objective metric for a specifically subjective art.
Right? Like maybe the person that's reading it doesn't agree with your viewpoints.
Sure, you're right. So then it becomes,
you need to pick something a little more concrete as your example, like lifting weights. Like saying, man, I can lift better, I can lift stronger. I just need to put more effort into it, and then suddenly your 1 rep max is higher than you thought it would be. Whereas the next time you do it, you're like, oh man, I'm crazy strong. I can do this. I got this. This is easy. And it turns out you lost 10 pounds on your overhead press or something.
Well, I think that
that has a concrete metric. Something
I think
measurable,
it is
repeatable.
necessary to observe it from the subjective perspective, because it's the only perspective that this thing happens on. And if in fact 40% of Americans are getting college degrees, and if in fact what percentage of those people that are getting college degrees don't in fact deserve it because they were writing for the teacher rather than for the subject matter, and then what percentage of people are grossly miseducated because they were rewarded for writing for the teacher, and now they think that is the right answer, whereas in reality the teacher was wrong the entire time.
Well, that was like that thing I was talking about the last time, that article. I still can't find it, where when you're writing an article, you do not write it based off of like your own subjection. You write it based off of your professor's subjection. That way, it's like the professor's basically reading something that he himself would have wrote, and he would more likely pass it. So I agree that. Well, that also falls into like my belief that most college degrees are, like most people with college degrees don't actually deserve them.
Let me extrapolate it one more step. If I say I want to, after college, or even while I'm in college, write a book that is political science in nature. And in the process of writing that book, I feel that my opinion, because my opinion that I expressed honestly received a poor grade, now I'm going to be put in this place where I'm going to assume, potentially and probably wrongly, that if I try and publish work with that same frame of mind, that it will be poorly received. But if I publish work with the teacher's perspective and frame of mind, it will be positively received, which is also probably incorrect because the teacher is probably just as wrong as I am, or not. Like, how can I feel confident in my work when I don't know the subjective value of my work?
Well, I mean, you do know the subjective value of your work because it's
No,
based off of your own subjectiveness.
except for the subjective value is an aggregate measurement across the market.
The subjective value of your work is being represented in what you're getting paid for it, or in the case of schooling, the grade you're going to receive for it, because your paper is specifically directed towards a specific audience, that is the teacher, and then the teacher rewards you based on what they believe your value is, which is your grade.
I guess what I'm struggling is, why am I writing for a specific audience when I should be writing for a certain subject matter?
No, you should be writing for a specific audience. You have to be able to tailor not so much the message, but the way you deliver it to get through to that audience.
I say I'm not a demagogue, and I don't want to be a demagogue.
You're not a demagogue either, because you're, one, aware of your own flaws, and two, you're also aware of the flaws in your argument. As long as you have those two things in mind, you won't be a demagogue, because you can actually affirmatively address the flaws and counter them, or at least acknowledge them. Demagogues pretend the flaws don't exist.
That's true.
I recently wrote an article for the Indiana Citizens Defense League on stabilizing pistol braces. And that wasn't a fun subject to talk about because it's not something I deeply care about on a specific level, but it's a broader subject. But I had to address it to a specific type of audience, that is gun owners who are wondering why the fuck there's a massive fight about it in the first place. Because if I just write it as a very dry, scholarly article with no thought of audience, but rather the basic subject matter, no one's going to fucking care what it says. But it's directed towards people who care enough to work with 2A groups, but not enough to really have an opinion on stabilizing pistol braces in the first place. It's also why I use specific terms. I'm also trying to rewrite the way that group thinks. I can put the article into the Discord in a moment, but one specific term I refuse to use is referring to AR-15s with braces as pistols. They are not pistols. They are rifle caliber pistols. It gives you both sides of that argument on it, in that, yes, it shoots a rifle bullet, but it's legally a pistol, which is a dumb point. And I point that out in the article. We should just be able to make them as SBRs and not have to ask the government for permission. But instead, it's a
you mean like what I did?
Yeah.
Anyway.
But anyway. You have to write for a specific audience. You just, one, have to be aware of what your own flaws are as a writer.
All right,
two, acknowledge the flaws of your argument.
Come back to this. It also depends on how much you value your audience's opinion.
Right, yeah.
If you don't like your professor, does it really matter if he gave you a 60 on the essay? No.
Yes.
It does matter, because that professor is an authority figure who's going to determine part of his future. Now, what another student thinks about it, that doesn't matter. If you didn't write it for them, if you didn't want them to read it and they just happen to read it as they're looking over the teacher's shoulder, yeah, like, why would you care?
Well, I mean, in your example of the book, though, would him giving you that 60% really dissuade you from publishing a book if you actually don't value his opinion to begin with?
Maybe I value it more than I want to admit. But let me try and sum up all the stuff that you guys just told me and the lesson I learned. I should write for a specific audience, and in my opinion, that audience is me. And so my complaint is actually fundamentally, why don't more people agree with me? Why aren't I more popular? And I'm going to cry about that.
It's because you're fat and poor, you know it.
Where the fuck is my trophy?
So we finally made the Bear Jew cry.
Yeah, I complain all the time about how I don't have friends, but then I know
all we had to do to
outside.
make him cry, I thought, was just talk about wooden doors and gas chambers. Turns out, just tell him that he can't write good.
So true.
I mean, all right. Do you really want to be popular though?
I mean, like, if the context of being popular means more of books are being sold, then yes.
I don't want to be
Well,
popular.
okay,
I want to
that's
be.
fair.
How about this? I don't want to be popular. I want to be victorious. I want to win whatever fight I'm having. Popularity in and of itself might be a part of it, but it's not
Sure.
the focus.
I mean,
I'm correlating popularity to the shekels going up. So
I
That's
understand
a
where you're
victory.
coming from. But,
So maybe
I mean-
no, don't even think of it as a popularity thing. What if a bunch of people are buying it just to shit on you, to send it to their friends so they can publicly shit on you for it? What if they're spite buying it? They don't like you, but they increased
I
your
mean,
income. That's why Ben Shapiro's so popular. Half the people who watch him probably fucking hate him, but they just can't stop watching.
I was actually, no, I wouldn't use Ben Shapiro as an example.
It's like hate fucking.
it's true. Been there, done that.
Well, look at like the author for Harry Potter, right? When
J.K.
she,
Rowling.
no wait, was it her? It might have been her.
Yeah, she took the stance against like transgenderism.
No, I
in
mean when
sports.
she first like released her books, like I'm pretty sure, like let's say you were legitimately thinking about publishing a book, I'm pretty sure she was in the same situation where she was afraid that people weren't going to like it.
Yeah, but her books didn't have a political bent. My books would be explicitly political. So,
Well, that's where then you run into the problem where then they are always going to be geared towards a specific
basically,
audience.
I really just want to be like Mark Levin, Steve Deese. I just want to say what a good portion of people want to hear, and then crank out a book every 4 to 6 months and benefit massively from it. Even though, like,
Well, Steve Deese, and it's Deese, not Deese. It's starting to irritate me.
okay, dude, he's not gonna fuck you, bro.
I know. I've had
You
enough
ain't gonna
people say my
publish your
own
book,
name wrong.
guy.
I know. He's actually had me on the air before, but it's more the way Deese does it is the way I said before. He acknowledges his own flaws. He acknowledges the flaws in his argument, and because he's honest about those, he does attract an audience, and then that audience buys his content. It's not so much he makes it trying to attract an audience specifically, but he does write from a certain point of view. He speaks from a certain point of view because that bias is unavoidable. So it attracts people who are interested in that. But he doesn't kowtow to them. One of his rules of political warfare is never abandon your base unless they're morally wrong. He's pushed back against his base before. Like he was initially a never Trumper. Or not quite a never Trumper, but he was not a Trump guy. He was set to be like one of his main campaign strategists during the 2016 campaign, and then Trump had his "I like war heroes that don't get captured" moment, and Deese dropped out of that and worked for Ted Cruz instead.
Yeah.
But once Trump won, he said, "All right, we got to learn how to live with this." And then he was trying to figure out why so much of his base or his audience liked Trump. And once he kind of started listening to them and realizing why, he started to see their point, and he started paying attention to the policy, ignoring the character, and then he started supporting Trump more. So
I think that
he
most
maintained
people,
his positions, his principles rather, and realized the position he took did not support his principles. So he acknowledged the flaws in his argument and addressed them.
yeah, I mean, and YouTubers make apology videos all the time. I think that most people watch Steve
No,
Dialectic.
he doesn't make apology videos.
It sounds like
that's
exactly what you just described. He acknowledged the fault in his reasoning, and then came up with a new set of reasoning. Yeah, it's an apology. It's an apology video.
You'd have to actually watch Steve Deese to get what I'm talking about.
All right. Well, when I watch Steve Dialectic, I basically see bubbles without the glasses, and I struggle to take him seriously at all.
I struggled too the first time I saw his little blurb on the Blaze TV app. He looked effeminate, and I was like, I'm not gonna watch a dude who's gay talk about the value of Christianity. I already don't watch Dave Rubin. Why would I watch Steve Deese? And then I listened to Steve Deese because he comes on after Glenn Beck when they do Blaze TV live on the app. You got to get your Glenn Beck in if you're a conservative. And he just kept going. I'm in the middle of cooking. I got bacon grease on my hands. I can't just tap my phone to turn off the show. So I'm like, okay, let's listen. And I think it was probably on a Wednesday because he does his buy, sell, hold segments on Wednesday. And they're fucking ridiculous and hilarious because they're not just straight politics. It could be politics, pop culture, sports, just random bullshit, mocking Steve Davis for never getting invited to CPAC, everything.
Glenn Beck looks like he tries too hard to be a father figure for everybody.
Glenn Beck looks like a fat Colonel Sanders cosplayer.
Yeah, there's something about him. I don't really listen to him.
I stopped listening to him again. I have phases where I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna listen to Glenn. He's good, and I'm annoyed now. The last major phase I had listening to Glenn Beck though was around October, November 2019. So I got the early drop on COVID when no one else was talking about it.
Well, that's like, I mean, I've had that issue with Ben Shapiro. It's usually when he gets.
You have to slow Ben Shapiro down to like 80% speed to understand what he says.
Bullshit. Watch him at 2 times or you're not a real man.
And who's the other one? Milo Yakovich?
Dude, Milo Yiannopoulos has not been commercially viable for like 4 years. He doesn't even publish content.
He's trying to get back into the game by he's trying to get attention again by claiming that he's now a reformed sodomite. Yeah, well, not straight, celibate.
He's straight now. Okay.
He's celibate, not straight. He's an anti-sodomite now. I don't know if it's true. It could be either. I've talked with plenty of people who've given up homosexuality for Christ, and that's amazing for them. It's just Milo Yiannopoulos was already a big name, and he lost the fame, and he might be trying to get it back.
And he had already embraced Christ. He was a practicing Catholic, but he was gay in spite of that. You know, I don't know.
It's in the face of your God, Dotson. What are you gonna do?
I wouldn't be surprised if it was all performative the entire time. I mean, he just seems like the kind of guy that would do that.
Well, that's why I stopped watching him like 4 years ago. Is that he was just too over the top with stuff, and it came off as illegitimate, and I don't know, it rubbed me wrong.
I mean, to be honest, I almost never watch these at all anymore. The one I watch most recently or most often nowadays is like Dave Smith, but then like the moment he starts talking about Israel, I just like my blood starts to boil, dude. It just makes me angry, and so I don't even watch him that much anymore, which is like stupid, kind of, but like I don't know.
It's honestly, I think it's fine to like. I always thought it was weird that like with Stephen Colbert, right? All his followers, they agree with every point he says, which is gross. Like that's impossible. There's no way you can agree with everything.
There is if you're being programmed.
It's a cult.
No, that's what I'm kind of getting at. But like with Ben Shapiro, right? Like I don't agree with everything he says, but I'll still listen to what he says.
You know what loses me with Ben Shapiro? You all might laugh, but it's something real simple.
The fact that he's Jewish?
The fact he puts Israel above everything else?
Okay, well, Harris had half right. Jewish. Orthodox. He's Orthodox, right? But what is he missing? What is he fucking missing?
His curls?
A beard, bro. I mean, yeah, technically.
Can he even grow one?
Yeah, he can.
He's like permanently 9 years old.
He can definitely grow a beard. He's talked before about how he shaves like twice a day. And he goes through all this.
Vagina? He shaves his vagina twice a day, clearly.
Maybe.
Yeah, I swear, someone mass dosed him with soy at the age of 9, and it just stopped everything. It
was all that violin playing. But the curls.
I play violin and viola. I grow facial hair.
I don't know. I haven't seen it.
You also haven't seen me in 7 years. I also shave like every now and then because if I don't, my wife will kill me.
That sucks. But in regards to the curls, they just have to be long enough for you to grab. So as long as he's got hair there, he's fine on that. But the whole shaving thing, that's completely inappropriate for an Orthodox Jew. And we all know that the only reason he does it, because he does shave, whether or not he can grow a nice beard or not is irrelevant. He's not supposed to shave. So the fact that he does it at all, it tells me that his whole shtick is all about marketing, which undermines, in my opinion, instantly any portion of his message. The fact that he's sacrificing a part of his identity, i.e. a Jew without a beard, and he's trying to still advertise himself as a Jewish conservative. Mark Levin does the same thing, but I think he actually grows a beard nowadays.
All right, I see where you're coming from. I mean, it's a little tough not being Jewish, but okay.
Yeah, it's about time to wrap this up. I gotta go make dinner.
Bro, we're only at 2 hours and 20 minutes, man. You can't go for another 2 hours?
No, because I've got a wife and 3 kids to feed.
Oh,
We'll get rid of them.
Yeah,
That's cringe.
Pull a Sergeant Walter. I'm kidding. Bad joke. I'm so sorry.
No, he needs someone living in his shed to do that.
By the way, crazy coincidence. The last thing I'll say before I try and wrap it up, that the person hosting the Shanghai show, fucking clone of Sergeant Walter, dude. Creep me out.
No way.
It looked
Bullshit.
identical to what.
Imagine it was him though. And he's like,
He faked his death.
Oh
he's
no,
like,
he's serving life, isn't he?
and he, yeah, I think so. Imagine he was just out on like some prison reform thing. Jesus
Yeah,
Christ.
he's a fire eater in this show. Dumb as shit. So I think that we talked mostly about vaccine passports and their tangential effects on us. We analyzed it a little bit from the rules of political warfare, from what is considered demonstration of hate, and we spent an extensive amount of time asking if we can avoid the bloodshed. I think that we got some mixed messages today, and hopefully we're all wrong and everything works out fucking beautifully. So I'm gonna hit the button to stop recording now. So GG everybody.
Awesome.
Good shit.